Chapter 7, An Essay on Power. The Responsibilities of Leaders. A few comments on power, being or working close to or under a power, which is to say, a leader or one who exerts wide primary influence on the affairs of men. I have written it this way, using two actual people to give an example of magnitude enough to interest and to furnish some pleasant reading. And I used a military sphere so it could be seen clearly without restimulation of admin problems. The book referenced is a fantastically able book, by the way. The Mistakes of Simon Bolivar and Manuela Sáenz. Reference: the book entitled The Four Seasons of Manuela by Victor W. von Hagen, a biography. Simon Bolivar was the liberator of South America from the yoke of Spain. Manuela Sáenz was the liberatress and consort. Their acts and fates are well recorded in this moving biography. But aside from any purely dramatic value, the book lays bare and motivates various actions of great interest to those who lead, who support, or are near leaders. Simon Bolivar was a very strong character. He was one of the richest men in South America. He had real personal ability, given to only a handful on the planet. He was a military commander without peer in history. Why he would fail and die in exile, to be later deified, is thus of great interest. What mistakes did he make? Manuela Sáenz was a brilliant, beautiful, and able woman. She was loyal, devoted, quite comparable to Bolivar, far above the cut of average humanoids. Why then did she live a vilified outcast, receive such violent social rejection, and die of poverty and remain unknown to history? What mistakes did she make? Bolivar's errors. The freeing of things is the reverse unstated dramatization, the opposite side of the coin, to the slavery enjoined by the mechanisms of the mind. Unless there is something to free men into, the act of freeing is simply a protest of slavery. And as no humanoid is free while aberrated in the body cycle, it is of course a gesture to free him politically, as it frees him only into the anarchy of dramatizing his aberrations with no control whatever. And without something to fight exterior, and with no exteriorization of his interest, he simply goes mad noisily or quietly. Once as great a wrong as depraving beings has been done, there is of course no freedom short of freeing one from the depravity itself, or at least from its most obvious influences in the society. In short, one would have to deaberrate a man before his whole social structure could be deaberrated. If one lacked the whole ability to free man wholly from his reactive patterns, then one could free men from their stimulators in the society at least. If one had the whole of the data, but lacked the Scientology tech, one would simply use reactive patterns to blow the old society apart and then pick up the pieces neatly in a new pattern. If one had no inkling of how reactive one can get, and Bolivar of course had no knowledge whatever in that field, there yet remained a workable formula used instinctively by most successful practical political leaders. If you free a society from those things you see wrong with it, and use force to demand to do what is right, and if you carry forward with decision and thoroughness and without continual temporizing, you can, in the applications of your charm and gifts, bring about a great political reform or improve a failing country. So Bolivar's first error, most consistent it was, too, was contained in the vital words, "you see," in the above paragraph. He didn't look, and he didn't even listen to sound intelligence reports. He was so sure he could glow things right, or fight things right, or charm things right, that he never looked for anything wrong to correct until it was too late. This is the ne plus ultra of personal confidence, amounting to supreme vanity. When he appeared it would all come right was not only his belief, but his basic philosophy. So the first time it didn't work, he collapsed. All his skills and charm were channeled into this one test. Only that could he observe. Not to compare with Bolivar, but to show my understanding of this, I once had a similar one. I would keep going as long as I could, and when I was stopped, I would then die. This was a solution mild enough to state and really hard to understand until you had an inkling of what I meant by keeping going. Meteors keep going very, very fast. And so did I. Then one day, ages back, I finally was stopped. After countless little stoppings by social contacts and family to prepare me, culminating in a navy more devoted to braid than dead enemies. And literally, I quit. For a while, I couldn't get a clue of what was wrong with me. Life went completely unlivable until I found a new solution. So I know the frailty of these single solutions, not to compare myself, but just to show it happens to us all, not just Bolivar's. Bolivar had no personal insight at all. He could only outsight, and even then he did not look or listen. He glowed things right. Pitifully, it was his undoing that he could, until he no longer could. When he couldn't glow, he roared, and when he couldn't roar, he fought a battle. Then, civic enemies were not military enemies, so he had no solution left at all. It never occurred to him to do more than personally magnetize things into being right and victorious. His downfall was that he made far too heavy a use of a skill simply because it was easy. He was too good at this one thing, so he never looked to any other skill, and he never even dreamed there was any other way. He had no view of any situation and no idea of the organizational or preparatory steps necessary to political and personal victory. He only knew military organization, which is where his organizational insight ceased. He was taught on the high wine of French revolt, notorious in its organizational inability to form cultures, and that fatally by a childhood teacher who was intensely impractical in his own private life, Simon Rodriguez, an unfrocked priest turned tutor. Bolivar had no personal financial skill. He started wealthy and wound up a pauper, a statistic descending from one of the, if not the, richest man in South America down to a borrowed nightshirt to be buried in as an exile. And this, while the property of royalists was wide open, the greatest land and mine valuables of South America wide open to his hand. And that's not believable, but true. He never collected his own debt of loans to governments, even when the head of those governments. So it is no wonder we find two more very real errors leading to his downfall. He did not get his troops or officers rewarded, and he did not aim for any solvency of the states he controlled. It was all right if there were long years of battle ahead for them to be unpaid, as no real riches were yet won, but not to reward them when the whole place was at his disposal. Well, the limit of his ability consisted of demanding a bit of cash for current pay from churches, which were not actively against him at first, but which annoyed them no end, and a few household expenses. He could have, and should have, set aside all royalist property and estates for division amongst his officers, their men, and his supporters. It had no owners now. And this failure cost the economy of the country the tax loss of all those productive estates, the whole wealth of the land. So it is no wonder his government, its taxable estates, now inoperative or at best hoarded by a profiteer or looted by Indians, was insolvent. Also, by failing to do such an obvious act, he delivered property into the hands of more provident enemies and left his officers and men penniless to finance any support for their own stability in the new society, and so for his own. As for state finance, the great mines of South America, suddenly ownerless, were overlooked and were then grabbed and worked by foreign adventurers who simply came in and took them without payment. Spain had run the country on the finance of mine tithes and general taxes. Bolivar not only didn't collect the tithes, he let the land become so worthless as to be untaxable. He should have gotten the estates going by any shifts and should have state-operated all royalist mines once he had them. To not do these things was complete, but typically humanoid, folly. In doing this property division, he should have left it all up to officers' committees operating as courts of claim without staining his own hands in the natural corruption. He was left doubly open, as he not only did not attend to it, he also got the name of corruption when anybody did grab something. He failed as well to recognize the distant widespread nature of his countries, despite all his riding and fighting over them, and so sought tightly centralized government, not only centralizing states, but also centralizing the various nations into a federal state. And this over a huge landmass full of insurmountable ranges, impassable jungles and deserts, and without mail, telegraph, relay stages, roads, railroads, river vessels, or even footbridges repaired after a war of attrition. A step echelon from a pueblo, village, to a state, from a state to a country, and a country to a federal state was only possible in such huge spaces of country where candidates could never be known personally over any wide area, and whose opinions could not even be circulated more than a few miles of burro trail, where only the pueblo was democratic, and the rest all appointive from pueblo on up, himself the ratifier of titles, if he even needed that. With his own officers and armies controlling the land, as owners of all wrested from royalists and the crown of Spain, he would have had no revolts. There would have been little civil wars, of course, but a court to settle their final claims could have existed at federal level and kept them traveling so much over those vast distances it would have crippled their enthusiasm for litigation on the one hand, and, on the other, by dog-eat-dog settlements, would have given him the strongest rulers if he took neither side. He did not step out and abdicate a dictatorial position. He mistook military acclaim and ability for the tool of peace. War only brings anarchy, so he had anarchy. Peace is more than a command for unity, his favorite phrase. A productive peace is getting men busy and giving them something to make something of that they want to make something of and telling them to get on with it. He never began to recognize a suppressive and never considered anyone needed killing except on a battlefield. There it was glorious, but somebody destroying his very name and soul, and the security of every supporter and friend, the SP Santander, his vice president, who could have been arrested and executed by a corporal's guard on 1/100th of available evidence, who could suborn the whole treasury and population against him without Bolivar, continually warned, loaded with evidence, ever even reprimanding him. And this brought about his loss of popularity and his eventual exile. He also failed in the same way to protect his military family or Manuela Sáenz from other enemies. So he weakened his friends and ignored his enemies just by oversight. His greatest error lay in that while dismissing Spain, he did not dismiss that nation's most powerful minion, the Church, and did not even localize it or reward a South American separate branch to loyalty or do anything at all, except extort money from it, to an organization which continually worked for Spain as only it could work, on every person in the land in a direct anti-Bolivar reign of terror behind the scenes. You either suborn such a group or you take them out when they cease to be universal and become or are an enemy's partner. As the Church held huge properties, and as Bolivar's troops and supporters went unpaid, even of the penny soldiers' pay, if one was going to overlook the royalist estates, one could at least have seized the Church property and given it to the soldiers. General Vallejo did this in 1835 in California, a nearly contemporary act, with no catastrophe from Rome. Or the penniless countries could have taken them over. You don't leave an enemy financed and solvent while you let your friends starve in a game like South American politics. Oh, no. He wasted his enemies. He exported the Godos or defeated royalist soldiers. They mostly had no homes but South America. He issued no amnesties they could count on. They were shipped off or left to die in the ditch, the best artisans in the country among them. When one, General Rodil, would not surrender Callao Fortress after Peru was won, Bolivar, after great gestures of amnesty, failed to obtain surrender and then fought the fort. 4,000 political refugees and 4,000 royalist troops died over many months in full sight of Lima, fought heavily by Bolivar only because the fort was fighting. But Bolivar had to straighten up Peru urgently, not fight a defeated enemy. The right answer to such a foolish commander as Rodil, as Bolivar did have the troops to do it, was to cover the roads with cannon enfilade potential to discourage any sortie from the fort, put a larger number of his own troops in a distant position of offense but ease and comfort and say, "We're not going to fight. The war's over, silly man. Look at the silly fellows in there, living on rats when they can just walk out and sleep home nights, or go to Spain, or enlist with me, or just go camping, and let anybody walk in and out who pleased, making the fort commander, Rodil, the prey of every pleading wife and mother without and would-be deserter or mutineer within, until he did indeed sheepishly give up the pretense. A man cannot fight alone." But battle was glory to Bolivar, and he became intensely disliked because the incessant cannonade, which got nowhere, was annoying. Honors meant a great deal to Bolivar. To be liked was his life, and it probably meant more to him than to see things really right. He never compromised his principles, but he lived on admiration, a rather sickening diet since it demands in turn continuous theater. One is what one is, not what one is admired or hated for. To judge oneself by one's successes is simply to observe that one's postulates worked and breeds confidence in one's ability. To have to be told it worked only criticizes one's own eyesight and hands a spear to the enemy to make his wound of vanity at his will. Applause is nice. It's great to be thanked and admired. But to work only for that? And his craving for that, his addiction to the most unstable drug in history, fame, killed Bolivar. That self-offered spear. He told the world continually how to kill him, reduce its esteem. So as money and land can buy any quantity of cabals, he could be killed by curdling the esteem, the easiest thing you can get a mob to do. He had all the power. He did not use it for good or evil. One cannot hold power and not use it. It violates the power formula, for it then prevents others from doing things if they had some of the power. So they then see as their only solution the destruction of the holder of the power, as he, not using power or delegating it, is the unwitting block to all their plans. So even many of his friends and armies finally agreed he had to go. They were not able men. They were in a mess. But bad or good, they had to do something. Things were desperate, broken down, and starving after 14 years of civil war. Therefore, they either had to have some of that absolute power, or else nothing could be done at all. They were not great minds. He did not need any great minds, he thought, even though he invited them verbally. He saw their petty, often murderous solutions, and he rebuked them, and so held the power and didn't use it. He could not stand another personality threat. The trouble in Peru came when he bested its real conqueror, from the Argentine, San Martin, in a petty triumph over adding Guayaquil to Colombia. Bolivar wished to look triumphant again, and didn't notice it really cost him the support, and Peru, the support of San Martin, who understandably resigned and went home, leaving Bolivar, Peru, to conquer. Unfortunately, it had already been in his hands. San Martin needed some troops to clean up a small royalist army, that was all. San Martin didn't need Peru's loss of Guayaquil, which never did anybody any real good anyway. Bolivar would become inactive when faced with 2 areas' worth of problems. He did not know which way to go, so he did nothing. Brave beyond any general in history on the battlefield, the Andes, or in torrential rivers, he did not really have the bravery needed to trust inferior minds and stand by their often shocking blunders. He feared their blunders, so he did not dare unleash his many willing hounds. He could lead men, make men feel wonderful, make men fight and lay down their lives after hardships no army elsewhere in the world has ever faced before or since. But he could not use men even when they were begging to be used. It is a frightening level of bravery to use men you know can be cruel, vicious, and incompetent. He had no fear of their turning on him ever. When they finally did, only then he was shocked. But he protected the people from authority given to questionably competent men. So he really never used but 3 or 4 generals of mild disposition and enormously outstanding ability. And to the rest, he denied power. Very thoughtful of the nebulous people, but very bad indeed for the general good. And it really caused his death. No, Bolivar was theater. It was all theater. One cannot make such errors and still pretend that one thinks of life as life, red-blooded and factual. Real men and real life are full of dangerous, violent, live situations, and wounds hurt, and starvation is desperation itself, especially when you see it in one you love. This mighty actor, backed up with fantastic personal potential, made the mistake of thinking the theme of liberty and his own great role upon the stage was enough to interest all the working, suffering hours of men, buy their bread, pay their whores, shoot their wives' lovers, and bind their wounds, or even put enough drama into very hard-pressed lives to make them want to live it. No, Bolivar was unfortunately the only actor on the stage, and no other man in the world was real to him. And so he died. They loved him, but they were also on the stage too, where they were dying in his script or Rousseau's script for liberty, but no script for living their very real lives. He was the greatest military general in any history measured against his obstacles, the people and the land across which he fought. And he was a complete failure to himself and his friends, while being one of the greatest men alive at that. So we see how truly shabby others in leaders' boots amongst men must be. Manuela Sáenz. The tragedy of Manuela Sáenz as Bolivar's mistress was that she was never used, never really had a share, and was neither protected nor honored by Bolivar. Here was a clever, spectacular woman of fantastic fidelity and skill, with an enormous flair, capable of giving great satisfaction and service. and only her satisfaction ability was taken, and that not consistently, nor even honestly. In the first place, Bolivar never married her. He never married anybody. This opened up a fantastic breach in any defense she could ever make against hers or his enemies, who were legion. So her first mistake was in not in some way contriving a marriage. That she had an estranged husband she had been more or less sold to was permitted by her to wreck her life obliquely. She was too selfless to be real in all her very able plotting. For this marriage problem she could have engineered any number of actions. She had the solid friendship of all his trusted advisers, even his old tutor, yet she arranged nothing for herself. She was utterly devoted, completely brilliant, and utterly incapable of really bringing off an action of any final kind. She violated the power formula in not realizing that she had power. Manuela was up against a hard man to handle, but she did not know enough to make her own court effective. She organized one. She did not know what to do with it. Her most fatal mistake was in not bringing down Santander, Bolivar's chief enemy. That cost her everything she had before the end and after Bolivar died. She knew for years Santander had to be killed. She said it or wrote it every few days, yet never did she promise some young officer a nice night or a handful of gold to do it in a day when dueling was in fashion. It's like standing around discussing how the plainly visible wolf in the garden that's eating the chickens must be shot, even holding a gun, and never even lifting it while all one's chickens vanish for years. In a land overridden with priests, she never got herself a tame priest to bring about her ends. She was a fantastic intelligence officer, but she fed her data to a man who could not act to protect himself or friends, who could only fight armies dramatically. She did not see this and also quietly take on the portfolio of secret police chief. Her mistake was waiting to be asked to come to him, to act. She voluntarily was his best political intelligence agent. Therefore, she should have also assumed further roles. She guarded his correspondence, was intimate with his secretaries, and yet she never collected or forged or stole any document to bring down enemies, either through representations to Bolivar or a court circle of her own. And in an area with that low an ethic, that's fatal. She openly pamphleteered and fought violently as in a battle against her rabble. She had a great deal of money at her disposal. In a land of for-sale Indians, she never used a penny to buy a quick knife or even a solid piece of evidence. When merely opening her lips she could have had any sequestrated royalist estate, she went to litigation for a legitimate legacy never won, and another won but never paid. They lived on the edge of quicksand. She never bought a plank or a rope. Carried away by the glory of it all, devoted completely, potentially able and a formidable enemy, she did not act. She waited to be told to come to him, even when he lay dying and exiled. His command over her, who never obeyed any other, was too absolute for his own or her survival. Her assigned mistakes, pointed out at the time as her caprice and play-acting, were not her errors. They only made her interesting. They were far from fatal. She was not ruthless enough to make up for his lack of ruthlessness, and not provident enough to make up for his lack of providence. The ways open to her for finance, for action, were completely doorless. The avenue stretched out to the horizon. She fought bravely, but she just didn't take action. She was an actress for the theater alone, and she died of it, and she let Bolivar die because of it. Never once did Manuela look about and say, "See here, things mustn't go this wrong. My lover holds half a continent, and even I hold the loyalty of battalions, yet that woman threw a fish." Never did Manuela tell Bolivar's doctor, a rumored lover, "Tell that man he will not live without my becoming a constant part of his entourage, and tell him until he believes it or we'll have a new physician around here." The world was open. Where Theodora, the wife of Emperor Justinian I of Constantinople, a mere circus girl and a whore, ruled harder than her husband, but for her husband behind his back, and made him marry her as well, Manuela never had any bushel basket of gold brought in to give Bolivar for his unpaid troops, with a "just found it, dear," to his "where on earth," after the royalist captives had been carefully ransomed for jail escapes by her enterprising own entourage and officer friends. She never handed over any daughter of a family, clamoring against her, to troops, and then said which over-verbal family is next. She even held a colonel's rank, but only used it because she wore man's clothing afternoons. It was a brutal, violent, ruthless land, not a game of musical chairs. And so Manuela, penniless, improvident, died badly and in poverty, exiled by enemies and deserted by her friends. But why not deserted by her friends? They had all been poverty-stricken to a point quite incapable of helping her, even though they wanted to. For she once had the power to make them solvent, and didn't use it. They were in poverty before they won, but they did eventually control the land. After that, why make it a bad habit? And so we see two pathetic, truly dear but tinsel figures, both on a stage, both far removed from the reality of it all. And one can say, but if they had not been such idealists, they never would have fought so hard and freed half a continent. Or, if she had stooped to such intrigue, or he had been known for violent political actions, they would never have had the strength and never would have been loved. All very idealistic itself. They died in the ditch, unloved, hated, and despised. Two decent, brave people, almost too good for this world. A true hero, a true heroine, but on a stage and not in life. Impractical and improvident, and with no faintest gift either one to use the power they could assemble. This story of Bolivar and Manuela is a tragedy of the most piteous kind. They fought a hidden enemy, the church. They were killed by their friends. But don't overlook how impractical it is not to give your friends power enough when you have it to give. You can always give some of it to another if the first one collapses through inability. And one can always be brought down like a hare at a hunt who seeks to use the delegated power to kill you if you have the other friends. Life is not a stage for posturing and look at me, look at me, look at me. If one is to lead a life of command or a life near to command, one must handle it as life. Life bleeds, it suffers, it hungers, and it has to have the right to shoot its enemies until such time as comes a golden age. Aberrated man is not capable of supporting, in his present state, a golden declared age for 3 minutes, given all the tools and wealth in the world. If one would live a life of command, or one near to a command, one must then accumulate power as fast as possible and delegate it as quickly as feasible, and use every humanoid in long reach to the best and beyond his talents if one is to live at all. If one does not choose to live such a life, then go on the stage and be a real actor. Don't kill men while pretending it isn't real. Or one can become a recluse or a student or a clerk, or study butterflies, or take up tennis. For one is committed to certain irrevocable natural laws the moment one starts out upon a conquest, either as the man in charge or a person near to him or on his staff or in his army. And the foremost law, if one's ambition is to win, is of course to win, but also to keep on providing things to win and enemies to conquer. Bolivar let his cycle run to freedom and end there. He never had another plan beyond that point. He ran out of territory to free. Then he didn't know what to do with it and didn't know enough either to find somewhere else to free. But of course, all limited games come to end. And when they do, the players fall over on the field and become rag dolls, unless somebody at least tells them the game has ended, and they have no more game, nor any dressing room or homes, but just that field. And they lie upon the field, not noticing there can be no more game since the other team has fled, and after a bit they have to do something. And if the leader and his consort are sitting over on the grass being rag dolls too, of course, there isn't any game. And so the players start fighting amongst themselves just to have a game. And if the leader then says, "No, no," and his consort doesn't say, "Honey, you better phone the Baltimore Orioles for Saturday," then of course the poor players, bored stiff, say, "He's out, she's out. Now we're going to split the team in half and have a game." And that's what happened to Bolivar and Manuela. They had to be gotten rid of, for there was no game, and they didn't develop one to play while forbidding the only available game, minor civil wars. A whole continent containing the then major minds of the world, whole populations were left sitting there, freed. But none owned any of it, though the former owners had left. They weren't given it, nor were they made to manage it. No game. And if Bolivar had not been smart enough for that, he could at least have said, "Well, You monkeys are going to have quite a time getting the wheels going, but that's not my job. You decide on your type of government and what it's to be. Soldiers are my line. Now, I'm taking over those old estates of mine and the royalist ones nearby and the emerald mines just as souvenirs, and me and Manuela, we're going home." And he should have said that 15 minutes after the last royalist army was defeated in Peru. And his official family with him and 1,000 troops to which he was giving land would have moved right off smartly with him. And the people, after a few screams of horror at being deserted, would have fallen on each other, sabered a state together here and a town there, and gotten busy out of sheer self-protection in a vital new game. Who's going to be Bolivar now? Then, when home, he should have said, "Say, those nice woods look awfully royalist to me, and also those 1 million hectares of grazing land, Manuela. Its owner once threw a royalist fish, remember? So that's yours." And the rest of the country would have done the same and gotten on with the new game of "You was a royalist." And Bolivar and Manuela would have had statues built to them by the ton at once, as soon as agents could get to Paris with orders from an adoring populace. "Bolivar, come rule us," should have gotten an "I don't see any unfree South America. When you see a French or Spanish army coming, come back and tell me." That would have worked. And this poor couple would have died suitably adored in the sanctity of glory and, perhaps more importantly, in their own beds, not in a ditch. And if they had had to go on ruling, they could have declared a new game of pay the soldiers and officers with royalist land. And when that was a gone game, oust the church and give its land to the poor friendly Indians. You can't stand bowing back of the footlights forever with no show, even if you are quite an actor. Somebody else can make better use of any stage than even the handsomest actor who will not use it. Man is too aberrated to understand at least 7 things about power. 1. Life is lived by lots of people, and if you lead, you must either let them get on with it or lead them on with it actively. 2. When the game or the show is over, there must be a new game or a new show. And if there isn't, somebody else is jolly well going to start one, and if you won't let anyone do it, the game will become getting you. 3. If you have power, use it or delegate it, or you sure won't have it long. 4. When you have people, use them, or they will soon become most unhappy and you won't have them anymore. 5. When you move off a point of power, pay all your obligations on the nail, empower all your friends completely, and move off with your pockets full of artillery, potential blackmail on every erstwhile rival, unlimited funds in your private account, and the addresses of experienced assassins, and go live in Belgravia and bribe the police. And even then you may not live long if you have retained one scrap of domination in any camp you do not now control, or if you even say, "I favor politician Jiggs." Abandoning power utterly is dangerous indeed. But we can't all be leaders or figures strutting in the limelight, and so there's more to know about this. 6. When you're close to power, get some delegated to you, enough to do your job and protect yourself and your interests, for you can be shot, fellow, shot, as the position near power is delicious but dangerous. Dangerous always, open to the taunts of any enemy of the power who dare not really boot the power, but can boot you. So to live at all in the shadow or employ of a power, you must yourself gather and use enough power to hold your own, without just nattering to the power to kill Pete in straightforward or more suppressive veiled ways to him, as these wreck the power that supports yours. He doesn't have to know all the bad news, and if he's a power really, he won't ask all the time, "What are all those dead bodies doing at the door?" And if you are clever, you never let it be thought he killed them. That weakens you and also hurts the power source. "Well, boss, about all those dead bodies, nobody at all will suppose you did it. She over there, those pink legs sticking out, didn't like me." "Well," he'll say if he really is a power, "why are you bothering me with it if it's done and you did it? Where's my blue ink?" Or, "Skipper, 3 shore patrolmen will be along soon with your cook, Dober, and they'll want to tell you he beat up Simpson." "Who's Simpson?" "He's a clerk in the enemy office downtown." "Good. When they've done it, take Dober down to the dispensary for any treatment he needs. Oh yes, raise his pay." Or, "Sir, could I have the power to sign divisional orders?" "Sure." 7. And lastly, and most important, for we all aren't on the stage with our names in lights, always push power in the direction of anyone on whose power you depend. It may be more money for the power, or more ease, or a snarling defense of the power to a critic, or even the dull thud of one of his enemies in the dark, or the glorious blaze of the whole enemy camp as a birthday surprise. If you work like that, and the power you are near or depend upon is a power that has at least some inkling about how to be one, and if you make others work like that, then the power factor expands and expands and expands, and you too acquire a sphere of power bigger than you would have if you worked alone. Real powers are developed by tight conspiracies of this kind, pushing someone up in whose leadership they have faith. And, if they are right and also manage their man and keep him from collapsing through overwork, bad temper, or bad data, a kind of juggernaut builds up. Don't ever feel weaker because you work for somebody stronger. The only failure lies in taxing or pulling down the strength on which you depend. All failures to remain a power's power are failures to contribute to the strength and longevity of the work, health, and power of that power. Devotion requires active contribution outwards from the power as well as in. If Bolivar and Manuela had known these things, they would have lived an epic, not a tragedy. They would not have died in the ditch, he bereft of really earned praise for his real accomplishments even to this day. And Manuela would not be unknown even in the archives of her country as the heroine she was. Brave, brave figures. But if this can happen to such stellar personalities, gifted with ability tenfold over the greatest of other mortals, to people who could take a rabble in a vast impossible land and defeat one of Earth's then foremost powers with no money or arms, on personality alone, what then must be the ignorance and confusion of human leaders in general, much less little men stumbling through their lives of boredom and suffering? Let us wise them up, huh? You can't live in a world where even the great leaders can't lead. Chapter 8. The Basics of Suppression. Definitions. Suppressive person. A person who suppresses other people in his vicinity. A suppressive person will goof up or vilify any effort to help anybody, and particularly knife with violence anything calculated to make human beings more powerful or more intelligent. The whole rationale of the suppressive person, SP, is built on the belief that if anyone got better, the SP would be for it, as the others could overcome him then. He is fighting a battle he once fought and never stopped fighting. He is in an incident. Present time people are mistaken by him for past long-gone enemies. Therefore, he never really knows what he is fighting in present time, so just fights. Suppressive person is another name for antisocial personality. Potential trouble source. Somebody who is connected with a suppressive person who is invalidating him, his beingness, his life. The person is a potential trouble source, PTS, because he is connected to the suppressive person. Potential trouble source means the person is going to go up and fall down. And he is a trouble source because he is going to get upset, and because he is going to make trouble. And he really does make trouble. That's very carefully named. Roller coaster. A case that betters, then worsens. The person is doing well, or he is not doing well, and then is doing well, and then is not doing well. That is a roller coaster. And when he is not doing well, he is sometimes ill. A roller coaster is always connected to a suppressive person, and will not get steady gain until the suppressive is found on the case. Suppress. To squash, to sit on, to make smaller, to refuse to let reach, to make uncertain about his reaching, to render or lessen in any way possible by any means possible to the harm of the individual and for the fancied protection of the suppressor. Suppression. A harmful intention or action against which one cannot fight back. Thus, when one can do anything about it, it is less suppressive. Suppression, in its most fundamental sense, is knocking out the beingness or location of another or others. Mistakes, anatomy of. In the presence of suppression, one makes mistakes. People making mistakes or doing stupid things is evidence that a suppressive person exists in that vicinity. Two types of people. You probably have speculated on this many times. Are there two kinds of people, good people and bad people? Society is more or less organized on the basis that there are, and certainly one sees that some are successful and some aren't. Some are good to know, and some aren't. Even in modern TV fiction, one has the cowboys in the white hats and the cowboys in the black hats. Indeed, one probably couldn't have stories at all, to man's way of thinking, unless there were heroes and ogres. And even fiction is rigged as a moral lesson in good and bad people. Philosophers, long before Greece, pondered moral conduct in terms of good and bad, and Diogenes was looking for an honest man, implying some weren't. More recent speculation in the 19th century termed all men evil unless forced to be good. Some schools of thought tried to avoid the point by saying early childhood formed character. Yet other schools maintained man would always be evil unless personally threatened, which gives us the presence of police in the society. But even police sometimes work on the idea that there are good and bad people. From all this, one could judge that man had a problem about whether people are good or bad. Probably at this minute you could think of some examples of good people and bad people. You know, those who rave and gnaw the rug at the very thought of Scientology helping anyone, so therefore there must be people of evil intention toward their fellows. And there are. The research results you would be interested in show clearly that there are two types of behavior, that calculated to be constructive and that calculated to be disastrous. These are the two dominant behavior patterns. There are people, then, who are trying to build things up, and others who are trying to tear things down. And there are no other types. Actually, there aren't even shades of gray. The disaster type can be repressed into inactivity and illness, and the constructive type can also be repressed and made ill. Thus, there are two basic actions, each with many other subsidiary actions. There is also a cyclic or combined type who is alternately constructive and disastrous. So there are cowboys in white hats and cowboys in black hats, and the cowboys in the gray hats are too sick to be in the game. One scholarly chap, a very sick fellow, hopefully told me once that there were no true villains, no purely evil people. He was whistling past the graveyard. There may not be evil people, but there are people currently devoted to doing evil actions. All such conduct is apparent and dominant. We see such people all the time. We just don't want to see them. The underlying reasons for this are, in the absence of processing, fixed and unchangeable in any one lifetime. As man knows a man only in one lifetime, the basic cause or changes have not been observed. Thus, to all practical purposes for man, some are good and some are evil. And if we didn't have Scientology, it would not only not be observed, but couldn't ever be changed. That this condition exists, that half are good and half are bad according to their personalities, oddly enough does not alter basic Scientology concepts. It explains why certain persons appear to be evil and some appear to be good. Examining the actual goals of an individual shows us why. About half the goals of any one individual are constructive. The remainder are destructive. It takes a being a very long time to live completely through the cycle of one goal, much less a series of goals. Therefore, any one individual at any given long period of his existence is only fixated on disaster, and at a subsequent long period is fixated only on being constructive. So, the same being at different lifetimes is good and evil. Given a sudden overwhelming experience, a good person may be shifted violently in his own goals pattern and become evil. And a bad person, acted upon powerfully by life, will become good. But they also become sick. Their illness stems from being moved out of present time into past heavy energy patterns. It is no cure to so move them, despite the assertions of 19th century mentalists and their shock treatment. This shows why shock sometimes works and why changes of character come about. And it also shows why such changes are accompanied by severe illness and early death. The person is thrown violently out of present time into a painful past. The problem is not a problem of sanity and insanity. It is a problem of disastrous motives and constructive motives, and the degree to which either is suppressed. By suppressing the damaging motives of a being who is currently inclined to disaster, one can make that being behave. But by suppressing the constructive motives of a being currently inclined to constructiveness, as in the military, one can make that being behave also. But both will become physically ill, neurotic, or insane in the absence of processing. So the same being in one long period is constructive, and in the next long period disastrous. As man measures time in small bits, such as youth, old age, or a lifetime, he could conceive of a being as either only constructive or only disastrous. Fortunately for us, this also solves the ancient riddle that one cannot be granted power without also having good intentions. The only way final and powerful abilities can be returned to an individual is by ridding him of all these hidden compulsions. This gives the Scientologist a useful insight into character. A sick being is one who has been bent upon violence and was suppressed, or one who was bent upon constructiveness and was suppressed. And it also tells us that no one with obsessive intentions will ever make it to the highest and most powerful levels with disastrous inclinations. But at the street level, with no processing involved, we have these two basic types, good and evil. And these subdivide into the good who couldn't be good and became sick, and the evil who couldn't be evil and became sick. But these facts are more than philosophic observations. They deliver to us understanding and more chance to be right about people. And they give us as well the wide-open door to making people well. One cannot push research into the stratosphere without learning more at sea level also. And this is what has happened here. The basic travail of man is that he is divided into those who build and those who demolish. And in this conflict of intentions, his fight, whichever side he is on, is always lost. Or was lost until the Scientologist came along. The antisocial personality, the anti-Scientologist. There are certain characteristics and mental attitudes which cause about 20% of a race to oppose violently any betterment activity or group. Such people are known to have antisocial tendencies. When the legal or political structure of a country becomes such as to favor such personalities in positions of trust, then all the civilizing organizations of the country become suppressed and a barbarism of criminality and economic duress ensues. Crime and criminal acts are perpetrated by antisocial personalities. Inmates of institutions commonly trace their state back to contact with such personalities. Thus, in the fields of government, police activities, and mental health, to name a few, we see that it is important to be able to detect and isolate this personality type so as to protect society and individuals from the destructive consequences attendant upon letting such have free rein to injure others. As they only comprise 20% of the population, and as only 2.5% of this 20% are truly dangerous, we see that with a very small amount of effort we could considerably better the state of society. Well-known, even stellar examples of such a personality are, of course, Napoleon and Hitler. Dillinger, Pretty Boy Floyd, Christie, and other famous criminals were well-known examples of the antisocial personality. But with such a cast of characters in history, we neglect the less stellar examples and do not perceive that such personalities exist in current life, very common, often undetected. When we trace the cause of a failing business, we will inevitably discover somewhere in its ranks the antisocial personality hard at work. In families which are breaking up, we commonly find one or the other of the persons involved to have such a personality. Where life has become rough and is failing, a careful review of the area by a trained observer will detect one or more such personalities at work. As there are 80% of us trying to get along and only 20% trying to prevent us, our lives would be much easier to live were we well informed as to the exact manifestations of such a personality. Thus we could detect it and save ourselves much failure and heartbreak. It is important, then, to examine and list the attributes of the antisocial personality. Influencing as it does the daily lives of so many, it well behooves decent people to become better informed on this subject. Attributes. The antisocial personality has the following attributes. 1. He or she speaks only in very broad generalities. They say, everybody thinks, everyone knows, and such expressions are in continual use, particularly when imparting rumor. When asked, who is everybody, it normally turns out to be one source, and from this source the antisocial person has manufactured what he or she pretends is the whole opinion of the whole society. This is natural to them, since to them all society is a large, hostile generality, against the antisocial in particular. 2. Such a person deals mainly in bad news, critical or hostile remarks, invalidation, and general suppression. Gossip, or harbinger of evil tidings, or rumor monger once described such persons. It is notable that there is no good news or complimentary remark passed on by such a person. 3. The antisocial personality alters to worsen communication when he or she relays a message or news. Good news is stopped and only bad news, often embellished, is passed along. Such a person also pretends to pass on bad news which is, in actual fact, invented. 4. A characteristic and one of the sad things about an antisocial personality is that it does not respond to treatment or reform or psychotherapy. 5. Surrounding such a personality, we find cowed or ill associates or friends who, when not driven actually insane, are yet behaving in a crippled manner in life, failing, not succeeding. Such people make trouble for others. When treated or educated, the near associate of the antisocial personality has no stability of gain, but promptly relapses or loses his advantages of knowledge, being under the suppressive influence of the other. Physically treated, such associates commonly do not recover in the expected time, but worsen and have poor convalescences. It is quite useless to treat or help or train such persons, so long as they remain under the influence of the antisocial connection. The largest number of insane are insane because of such antisocial connections, and do not recover easily for the same reason. Unjustly, we seldom see the antisocial personality actually in an institution. Only his friends and family are there. 6. The antisocial personality selects habitually the wrong target. If a tire is flat from driving over nails, he or she curses a companion or a non-causative source of the trouble. If the radio next door is too loud, he or she kicks the cat. If A is the obvious cause, the antisocial personality inevitably blames B or C or D. 7. The antisocial cannot finish a cycle of action. Such become surrounded with incomplete projects. 8. Many antisocial persons will freely confess to the most alarming crimes when forced to do so, but will have no faintest sense of responsibility for them. Their actions have little or nothing to do with their own volition. Things just happened. They have no sense of correct causation and particularly cannot feel any sense of remorse or shame, therefore. 9. The antisocial personality supports only destructive groups and rages against and attacks any constructive or betterment group. 10. This type of personality approves only of destructive actions and fights against constructive or helpful actions or activities. The artist in particular is often found as a magnet for persons with antisocial personalities who see in his art something which must be destroyed and covertly, as a friend, proceed to try. 11. Helping others is an activity which drives the antisocial personality nearly berserk. Activities, however, which destroy in the name of help are closely supported. 12. The antisocial personality has a bad sense of property and conceives that the idea that anyone owns anything is a pretense made up to fool people. Nothing is ever really owned. The basic reason the antisocial personality behaves as he or she does lies in a hidden terror of others. To such a person, every other being is an enemy to be covertly or overtly destroyed. The fixation is that survival itself depends on keeping others down or keeping people ignorant. If anyone were to promise to make others stronger or brighter, the antisocial personality suffers the utmost agony of personal danger. They reason that if they are in this much trouble with people around them weak or stupid, they would perish should anyone become strong or bright. Such a person has no trust to a point of terror. This is usually masked and unrevealed. When such a personality goes insane, the world is full of Martians or the FBI, and each person met is really a Martian or FBI agent. But the bulk of such people exhibit no outward signs of insanity. They appear quite rational. They can be very convincing. However, the list given above consists of things which such a personality cannot detect in himself or herself. This is so true that if you thought you found yourself in one of the above, you most certainly are not antisocial. Self-criticism is a luxury the antisocial cannot afford. They must be right because they are in continual danger in their own estimation. If you proved one wrong, you might even send him or her into a severe illness. Only the sane, well-balanced person tries to correct his conduct. Relief. If you were to weed out of your past by proper search and discovery those antisocial persons you have known, and if you then disconnected, you might experience great relief. Similarly, if society were to recognize this personality type as a sick being as they now isolate people with smallpox, both social and economic recoveries could occur. Things are not likely to get much better so long as 20% of the population is permitted to dominate and injure the lives and enterprise of the remaining 80%. As majority rule is the political manner of the day, so should majority sanity express itself in our daily lives without the interference and destruction of the socially unwell. The pity of it is, they will not permit themselves to be helped and would not respond to treatment if help were attempted. An understanding and ability to recognize such personalities could bring a major change in society and our lives. The social personality. Man in his anxieties is prone to witch hunts. All one has to do is designate people wearing black caps as the villains, and one can start a slaughter of people in black caps. This characteristic makes it very easy for the antisocial personality to bring about a chaotic or dangerous environment. Man is not naturally brave or calm in his human state, and he is not necessarily villainous. Even the antisocial personality in his warped way is quite certain that he is acting for the best and commonly sees himself as the only good person around, doing all for the good of everyone, the only flaw in his reasoning being that if one kills everyone else, none are left to be protected from the imagined evils. His conduct in his environment and toward his fellows is the only method of detecting either the antisocial or the social personalities. Their motives for self are similar: self-preservation and survival. They simply go about achieving these in different ways. Thus, as man is naturally neither calm nor brave, anyone to some degree tends to be alert to dangerous persons, and hence witch hunts can begin. It is therefore even more important to identify the social personality than the antisocial personality. One then avoids shooting the innocent out of mere prejudice or dislike, or because of some momentary misconduct. The social personality can be defined most easily by comparison with his opposite, the antisocial personality. This differentiation is easily done, and no test should ever be constructed which isolates only the antisocial. On the same test must appear the upper as well as lower ranges of man's actions. A test that declares only antisocial personalities without also being able to identify the social personality would be itself a suppressive test. It would be like answering yes or no to the question, "Do you still beat your wife?" Anyone who took it could be found guilty. While this mechanism might have suited the times of the Inquisition, it would not suit modern needs. As the society runs, prospers, and lives solely through the efforts of social personalities, one must know them, as they, not the antisocial, are the worthwhile people. These are the people who must have rights and freedom. Attention is given to the antisocial solely to protect and assist the social personalities in the society. All majority rules, civilizing intentions, and even the human race will fail unless one can identify and thwart the antisocial personalities and help and forward the social personalities in the society. For the very word society implies social conduct, and without it there is no society at all, only a barbarism with all men, good or bad, at risk. The frailty of showing how the harmful people can be known is that these then apply the characteristics to decent people to get them hunted down and eradicated. The swan song of every great civilization is the tune played by arrows, axes, or bullets used by the antisocial to slay the last decent men. Government is only dangerous when it can be employed by and for antisocial personalities. The end result is the eradication of all social personalities and the resultant collapse of Egypt, Babylon, Rome, Russia, or the West. You will note in the characteristics of the antisocial personality that intelligence is not a clue to the antisocial. They are bright or stupid or average. Thus, those who are extremely intelligent can rise to considerable, even head of state heights. Importance and ability or wish to rise above others are likewise not indexes to the antisocial. When they do become important or rise, they are, however, rather visible by the broad consequences of their acts. But they are as likely to be unimportant people or hold very lowly stations and wish for nothing better. Thus, it is the 12 given characteristics alone which identify the antisocial personality. And these same 12 reversed are the sole criteria of the social personality, if one wishes to be truthful about them. The identification or labeling of an antisocial personality cannot be done honestly and accurately unless one also, in the same examination of the person, reviews the positive side of his life. All persons under stress can react with momentary flashes of antisocial conduct. This does not make them antisocial personalities. The true antisocial person has a majority of antisocial characteristics. The social personality has a majority of social characteristics. Thus, one must examine the good with the bad before one can truly label the antisocial or the social. In reviewing such matters, very broad testimony and evidence are best. One or two isolated instances determine nothing. One should search all 12 social and all 12 antisocial characteristics and decide on the basis of actual evidence, not opinion. The 12 primary characteristics of the social personality are as follows. 1. The social personality is specific in relating circumstances. Joe Jones said, the Star newspaper reported, and gives sources of data where important or possible. He may use the generality of they or people, but seldom in connection with attributing statements or opinions of an alarming nature. 2. The social personality is eager to relay good news and reluctant to relay bad. He may not even bother to pass along criticism when it doesn't matter. He is more interested in making another feel liked or wanted than disliked by others and tends to err toward reassurance rather than toward criticism. 3. A social personality passes communication without much alteration, and if deleting anything, tends to delete injurious matters. He does not like to hurt people's feelings. He sometimes errs in holding back bad news or orders which seem critical or harsh. 4. Treatment, reform, and psychotherapy, particularly of a mild nature, work very well on the social personality. Whereas antisocial people sometimes promise to reform, they do not. Only the social personality can change or improve easily. It is often enough to point out unwanted conduct to a social personality to completely alter it for the better. Criminal codes and violent punishment are not needed to regulate social personalities. 5. The friends and associates of a social personality tend to be well, happy, and of good morale. A truly social personality quite often produces betterment in health or fortune by his mere presence on the scene. At the very least, he does not reduce the existing levels of health or morale in his associates. When ill, the social personality heals or recovers in an expected manner and is found open to successful treatment. 6. The social personality tends to select correct targets for correction. He fixes the tire that is flat rather than attack the windscreen. In the mechanical arts, he can therefore repair things and make them work. 7. Cycles of action begun are ordinarily completed by the social personality, if possible. 8. The social personality is ashamed of his misdeeds and reluctant to confess them. He takes responsibility for his errors. 9. The social personality supports constructive groups and tends to protest or resist destructive groups. 10. Destructive actions are protested by the social personality. He assists constructive or helpful actions. 11. The social personality helps others and actively resists acts which harm others. 12. Property is property of someone to the social personality, and its theft or misuse is prevented or frowned upon. The basic motivation. The social personality naturally operates on the basis of the greatest good. He is not haunted by imagined enemies, but he does recognize real enemies when they exist. The social personality wants to survive and wants others to survive, whereas the antisocial personality really and covertly wants others to succumb. Basically, the social personality wants others to be happy and do well, whereas the antisocial personality is very clever in making others do very badly indeed. A basic clue to the social personality is not really his successes, but his motivations. The social personality, when successful, is often a target for the antisocial, and by this reason he may fail. But his intentions included others in his success, whereas the antisocial only appreciate the doom of others. Unless we can detect the social personality and hold him safe from undue restraint, and detect also the antisocial and restrain him, our society will go on suffering from insanity, criminality, and war, and man and civilization will not endure. Of all our technical skills, such differentiation ranks the highest, since failing, no other skill can continue. As the base on which it operates, civilization will not be here to continue it. Do not smash the social personality, and do not fail to render powerless the antisocial in their efforts to harm the rest of us. Just because a man rises above his fellows or takes an important post does not make him an antisocial personality. Just because a man can control or dominate others does not make him an antisocial personality. It is his motives in doing so and the consequences of his acts which distinguish the antisocial from the social. Unless we realize and apply the true characteristics of the two types of personality, we will continue to live in a quandary of who our enemies are, and in doing so, victimize our friends. All men have committed acts of violence or omission for which they could be censured. In all mankind there is not one single perfect human being. But there are those who try to do right, and those who specialize in wrong, and upon these facts and characteristics you can know them. The potential trouble source. One must know what a suppressive person, SP, is, what a potential trouble source, PTS, is, and the mechanism of how and why a case roller coasters, and what that is. PTS and roller coaster. A roller coaster equals a suppressive person in that person's vicinity. If a person roller coasters, he is PTS. A potential trouble source is a connection with a suppressive. I'll give you the exact mechanics of it. Postulate, counterpostulate is the anatomy of a problem. Postulate versus postulate. That is the definition and the anatomy of a problem, and there is no other definition to a problem. The guy has had a purpose in life and somebody has suppressed it. Or a guy has had a purpose over a 24-hour period and somebody suppressed that purpose. In other words, his purpose was his postulate. The other person saying he couldn't do it was the counterpostulate. That is simply the anatomy of a problem, and there is no other reason for roller coaster. There just is no other datum. A connection with a suppressive person is a version of this. It's a version of a problem and is a specialized kind of problem, and that is what causes the roller coaster. The individual has run into a postulate-counterpostulate since his last improvement, which makes him a potential trouble source. Potential trouble source means the case is going to go up and fall down. And he's a trouble source because he's going to get upset. He's a trouble source because he's going to make trouble. And he's trouble for the auditor, and he's trouble for us, and he's trouble for himself, and so forth. And he really does make trouble. That's very carefully named. The SP isn't making trouble. He's just poisoning the whole universe. But he isn't making trouble. He's just going squash. Anybody says anything to him, squash. It's the PTS who makes the trouble. The three types of PTS. There are three types of PTS. Type 1 is the easy one. The SP on the case is right in present time, actively suppressing the person. Type 2 is harder, for the apparent suppressive person in present time is only a restimulator for the actual suppressive. Type 3 is beyond the facilities of orgs not equipped with hospitals, as these are entirely psychotic. Type 1. The Type 1 is normally handled by an ethics officer in the course of a hearing. The person is asked if anyone is invalidating him or his gains or Scientology, and if the PC answers with a name and is then told to handle or disconnect from that person, the good indicators come in promptly and the person is quite satisfied. If, however, there is no success in finding the SP on the case, Or if the person starts naming org personnel or other unlikely persons as SP, the ethics officer must realize that he is handling a Type 2 PTS, and because the auditing will consume time, sends the person to tech or qual for a search and discovery. A search and discovery is a process used to find the suppressions the person has had in life. It locates the suppressives on the case and is used to nullify the influence of suppressive persons or things on a case, so the person will be able to be processed and will no longer be PTS. Auditors must be trained on the full body of this technology as well as the full body of ethics technology before they may use this procedure. It is easy to tell a Type 1 PTS from a Type 2. The Type 1 brightens up at once and ceases to roller coaster the moment the present time SP is spotted. The PC ceases to roller coaster. The PC does not go back on it and begin to beg off. The PC does not begin to worry about the consequences of disconnection. If the PC does any of these things, then the PC is a Type 2. It can be seen that ethics handles the majority of PTSs in a fast manner. There is no trouble about it. All goes smoothly. It can also be seen that ethics cannot afford the time to handle a Type 2 PTS. Therefore, when ethics finds its Type 1 approach does not work quickly, ethics must send the person to the proper division that is handling search and discovery. Type 2. The PC who isn't sure, won't disconnect, or still roller coasters, or who doesn't brighten up, can't name any SP at all, is a Type 2. Only search and discovery will help. The first thing to know is that case worsening is caused only by a PTS situation. There never will be any other reason. As soon as you doubt this datum and think about other causes or try to explain it some other way, you no longer prevent cases from worsening and no longer rescue those who have worsened. The second thing to know is that a suppressive is always a person, a being, or a group of beings. A suppressive is not a condition, a problem, a postulate. Problems and counterpostulates come into the matter, but the SP as a being or group must always be located as a being or a group, not as merely an idea. The third thing to know is that there can be an actual SP and another person or being similar to the actual one who is only an apparent SP. An actual SP actually suppresses another. An apparent SP only reminds the PC of the actual one and so is restimulated into being a PTS. The actual SP can be in present time, Type 1 PTS, or is in the past or distant, Type 2 PTS. The Type 2 always has an apparent SP who is not the SP on the case, is confusing the two, and is acting PTS only because of restimulation, not because of suppression. Type 3. The Type 3 PTS is mostly in institutions, or would be. In this case, the Type 2's apparent SP is spread all over the world, and is often more than all the people there are, for the person sometimes has ghosts about him or demons, and they are just more apparent SPs, but imaginary as beings as well. All institutional cases are PTSs. The whole of insanity is wrapped up on this one fact. The insane is not just a bad-off being. The insane is a being who has been overwhelmed by an actual SP until too many persons are apparent SPs. This makes the person roller coaster continually in life. The roller coaster is even cyclic, repetitive as a cycle. Handling an insane person as a Type 2 might work, but probably not case for case. One might get enough wins on a few to make one fail completely by so many loses on the many. Just as you tell a Type 2 to disconnect from the actual SP, wherever found on the track, you must disconnect the person from the environment. Putting the person in a current institution puts him in a bedlam, and when also treated, it may finish him, for he will roller coaster from any treatment given until made into a Type 2 and given a search and discovery. The task with a Type 3 is not treatment as such. It is to provide a relatively safe environment and quiet and rest, and no treatment of a mental nature at all. Giving him a quiet court with a motionless object in it might do the trick if he is permitted to sit there unmolested. Medical care of a very unbrutal nature is necessary, as intravenous feeding and soporifics, sleeping and quieting drugs, may be necessary. Such persons are sometimes also physically ill from an illness with a known medical cure. Treatment with drugs, shock, Operation is just more suppression. The person will not really get well, will relapse, etc. Standard auditing on such a person is subject to the roller coaster phenomena. They get worse after getting better. Successes are sporadic, enough to lead one on, and usually worsen again since these people are PTS. But removed from apparent SPs, kept in a quiet surroundings, not pestered or threatened or put in fear, the person comes up to type 2 and a search and discovery should end the matter. But there will always be some failures, as the insane sometimes withdraw into rigid unawareness as a final defense, sometimes can't be kept alive, and sometimes are too hectic and distraught to ever become quiet. The extremes of too quiet and never quiet have a number of psychiatric names, such as catatonia, withdrawn totally, and manic, too hectic. Classification is interesting but non-productive, since they are all PTS. All will roller coaster, and none can be trained or processed with any idea of lasting result, no matter the temporary miracle. Note: these paragraphs on the Type 3 make good a promise given in Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health, to develop institutional Dianetics. Remove a Type 3 PTS from the environment. Give him or her rest and quiet. Do a search and discovery when rest and quiet have made the person Type 2. The modern mental hospital, with its brutality and suppressive treatments, is not the way to give a psychotic quiet and rest. Before anything effective can be done in this field, a proper institution would have to be provided, offering only rest, quiet, and medical assistance for intravenous feedings and sleeping drafts where necessary, but not as treatment, and where no treatment is attempted until the person looks recovered, and only then a search and discovery as above under Type 2. Subsequent to the publication of the findings and technology contained in this chapter, LRH research culminated in the discovery of the full underlying mental and spiritual causes of psychosis and Type 3 PTS manifestations, as well as development of procedures for their resolution. These breakthroughs are available in Hubbard Communications Office bulletins, comprising the introspection rundown, which makes it possible to solve this condition solely through address of the spirit with ethics and auditing technology. Therefore, the use or requirement of medical facilities no longer applies to the handling of persons who are Type 3 PTS. A medical examination may be required by a case supervisor before beginning the rundown, and acceptance of individuals for participation in the introspection rundown is at the discretion of churches of Scientology. Stable data for handling the PTS. PTS means potential trouble source. There are two stable data which anyone has to have, understand, and know are true in order to obtain results in handling the person connected to suppressives. These data are 1. That all illness in greater or lesser degree and all foul-ups stem directly and only from a PTS condition. 2. That getting rid of the condition requires 3 basic actions. A. Understanding the tech of the condition. B. Discover. C. Handle or disconnect. Persons called upon to handle PTS people can do so very easily, far more easily than they believe. Their basic stumbling block is thinking that there are exceptions, or that there is other tech, or that the 2 above data have modifiers or are not sweeping. The moment a person who is trying to handle PTSs gets persuaded there are other conditions or reasons or tech, he is at once lost and will lose the game and not obtain results. And this is very too bad because it is not difficult and the results are there to be obtained. To turn someone who may be PTS over to an auditor just to have him mechanically audited may not be enough. In the first place, this person may not have a clue what is meant by PTS and may be missing all manner of technical data on life and may be so overwhelmed by a suppressive person or group that he is quite incoherent. Thus, just mechanically doing a process may miss the whole show as it misses the person's understanding of why it is being done. A PTS person is rarely psychotic, but all psychotics are PTS, if only to themselves. A PTS person may be in a state of deficiency or pathology which prevents a ready recovery, but at the same time he will not fully recover unless the PTS condition is also handled. For he became prone to deficiency or pathological illness because he was PTS, and unless the condition is relieved, no matter what medication or nutrition he may be given, he might not recover and certainly will not recover permanently. This seems to indicate that there are other illnesses or reasons for illness besides being PTS. To be sure, there are deficiencies and illnesses, just as there are accidents and injuries. But strangely enough, the person himself precipitates them, because being PTS predisposes him to them. In a more garbled way, the medicos and nutritionists are always talking about stress causing illness. Lacking full tech, they yet have an inkling that this is so, because they see it as somehow true. They cannot handle it, yet they recognize it, and they state that it is a senior situation to various illnesses and accidents. Well, we have the tech of this in more ways than one. What is this thing called stress? It is more than the medico defines it. He usually says it comes from operational or physical shock, and in this he has too limited a view. A person under stress is actually under a suppression on one or more dynamics. If that suppression is located and the person handles or disconnects, the condition diminishes. If he also has all the engrams and ARC breaks, problems, overts, and withholds audited out triple flow, and if all such areas of suppression are thus handled, the person would recover from anything caused by stress. Usually, the person has insufficient understanding of life or any dynamic to grasp his own situation. He is confused. He believes all his illnesses are true because they occur in such heavy books. At some time, he was predisposed to illness or accidents. When a serious suppression then occurred, he suffered a precipitation or occurrence of the accident or illness, and then, with repeated similar suppressions on the same chain, the illness or tendency to accidents became prolonged or chronic. To say then that a person is PTS to his current environment would be very limited as a diagnosis. If he continues to do or be something to which the suppressive person or group objected, he may become or continue to be ill or have accidents. Actually, the problem of PTS is not very complicated. Once you have grasped the two data first given, the rest of it becomes simply an analysis of how they apply to this particular person. A PTS person can be markedly helped in three ways. A. Gaining an understanding of the tech of the condition. B. Discovering to what or to whom he is PTS. C. Handling or disconnecting. Someone with the wish or duty to find and handle PTSs has an additional prior step. He must know how to recognize a PTS and how to handle them when recognized. Thus, it is rather a waste of time to engage in this hunt unless one has been checked out on all the material on suppressives and PTSs and grasps it without misunderstoods. In other words, the first step of the person is to get a grasp of the subject and its tech. This is not difficult to do. It may be a bit more difficult to learn to run an e-meter and considerably more difficult to learn how to list for items. But there again, this is possible and is much easier than trying to grope around guessing. With this step done, a person has no real trouble recognizing PTS people and can have success in handling them, which is very gratifying and rewarding. Let us consider the easiest level of approach. 1. Give the person the simpler materials on the subject and let him study them so that he knows the elements like PTS and suppressive. He may just cognite right there and be much better. It has happened. 2. Have him discuss the illness or accident or condition without much prodding or probing that he thinks now may be the result of suppression. He will usually tell you it is right here and now, or was a short time ago, and will be all set to explain it, without any relief, as stemming from his current environment or a recent one. If you let it go at that, he would simply be a bit unhappy and not get well, as he is discussing usually a late lock that has a lot of earlier material below it. 3. Ask when he recalls first having that illness or having such accidents. He will at once begin to roll this back and realize that it has happened before. You don't have to be auditing him, as he is all too willing to talk about this in a most informal manner. He will get back to some early this lifetime point usually. 4. Now ask him who it was. He will usually tell you promptly. And as you are not really auditing him, and he isn't going backtrack, and you are not trying to do more than key him out, you don't probe any further. 5. You will usually find that he has named a person to whom he is still connected. So you ask him whether he wants to handle or disconnect. Now, as the sparks will really fly in his life if he dramatically disconnects, and if he can't see how he can, you persuade him to begin to handle on a gradient scale. This may consist of imposing some slight discipline on him, such as requiring him to actually answer his mail or write the person a pleasant "good roads, good weather" note, or to realistically look at how he estranged them. In short, what is required in the handling is a low gradient. All you are trying to do is move the PTS person from effect over to slight gentle cause. 6. Check with the person again, if he is handling, and coach him along, always at a gentle "good roads and good weather" level, and no HENR, human emotion and reaction, if you please. That is a simple handling. You can get complexities, such as a person being PTS to an unknown person in his immediate vicinity that he may have to find before he can handle or disconnect. You can find people who can't remember more than a few years back. You can find anything you can find in a case, but simple handling ends when it looks pretty complex, and that's when you call in the auditor. But this simple handling will get you quite a few stars in your crown. You will be amazed to find that while some of them don't instantly recover, medication, vitamins, minerals will now work when before they wouldn't. You may also get some instant recovers, but realize that if they don't, you have not failed. The auditor can do a search and discovery after this with much more effect, as he isn't working with a completely uninformed person. A being is rather complex. He may have a lot of sources of suppression, and it may take a lot of very light auditing to get him up to where he can do work on suppressives, since these were, after all, the source of his overwhelm. And what he did to them might be more important than what they did to him, but unless you unburden him, he may not get around to realizing that. You can run into a person who can only be handled by expanded Dianetics, but you have made an entrance and you have stirred things up and gotten him more aware, and just that way you will find he is more at cause. His illness or proneness to accidents may not be slight. You may succeed only to the point where he now has a chance, by nutrition, vitamins, minerals, medication, treatment, and above all, auditing, of getting well. Unless you jogged this condition, he had no chance at all. For becoming PTS is the first thing that happened to him on the subject of illness or accidents. Further, if the person has had a lot of auditing and yet isn't progressing too well, your simple handling may all of a sudden cause him to line up his case. So do not underestimate what you or an auditor can do for a PTS, and don't sell PTS tech short or neglect it, and don't tolerate PTS conditions in people. You can do something about it, and so can they. PTS handling. Per policies on physical healing, insanity, and sources of trouble, a PTS, meaning a potential trouble source, is a person intimately connected with persons, such as marital or familial ties, of known antagonism to mental or spiritual treatment or Scientology. In practice, such persons, even when they approach Scientology in a friendly fashion, have such pressure continually brought to bear upon them by persons with undue influence over them that they make very poor gains in processing, and their interest is solely devoted to proving the antagonistic element wrong. A source of trouble. Such persons with antagonistic family members are a source of trouble to Scientology because their family members are not inactive. In fact, from direct experience with inquiry after inquiry into Scientology, in reference to various governmental inquiries into Scientology in the mid-1960s, in every instance churches of Scientology were exonerated and vindicated. It has been found that those who have created the conditions which brought about the inquiry in the first place, and those who testified before same, have been the wives, husbands, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, or grandparents of some Scientologist. Their testimony has been full of such statements as, "My son completely changed after he went into Scientology. He no longer was respectful to me. My daughter gave up a wonderful career as a hairdresser to go into Scientology. My sister got these funny, staring eyes the way all Scientologists have." Their testimony was illogical, and their descriptions of what occurred were untrue. But the point of the matter is that such persons did cause Scientology, Scientology orgs, and fellow Scientologists a great deal of trouble and difficulty. Don't create antagonism. Many Scientologists, in their misunderstanding and misapplication of Scientology, create the conditions that bring about the antagonism in the first place. A few illustrations of how this is done are as follows. Scientologist to mother: "I now know where you are on the tone scale. 1.1. Boy, are you sneaky." Evaluation and invalidation. Father to Scientologist: Now, I don't want you to borrow the car again without my permission. I have told you time and time, Scientologist to father. Okay, fine. Okay, good. Thank you. I got that. Not an acknowledgement, but an effort to shut up the father. Scientologist to older brother. You murdered me in a past life, you dirty dog. Evaluation and invalidation. Mother to Scientologist. Whatever are you doing? Scientologist to mother. I'm trying to confront your dreadful bank. Invalidation. There are so many ways to misuse tech and to invalidate and evaluate for others in a destructive fashion to bring about bypass charge, ARC breaks, and upset that they cannot all be possibly listed. The idea is not to do so. Why create trouble for yourself and for your fellow Scientologists, as nothing will have been gained but ill will? The why. Per offenses and penalties, it is a crime to be or become a PTS without reporting it or taking action, or to receive processing while PTS. Further, as per policies on physical healing, insanity, and sources of trouble, a PTS may not be trained. This means that a person who is PTS may not receive processing or training while PTS, and it also means that they had better do something to handle their condition. In the original, now reinstated, policy, the PTS individual was required to handle or disconnect before he or she could continue with training or processing. Many took the easy course and merely disconnected temporarily for the time of their training or processing, and so they did not in actual fact handle the condition in their lives which was upsetting them as Scientologists. In some cases, there was a misapplication of the tech, as their situations were totally handleable with the use of simple Scientology basics. Now, a very workable system for handling PTS situations has been developed, as covered here in PTS Handling and in Outline of Full PTS Handling. Following the steps given in these and making full use of all bulletins and policies on the subject of PTS handling will ensure situations get terminatedly handled. Each PTS individual should, as one step of his handling, report to ethics and, with the assistance of ethics, find a why as to his familial antagonism, and then set about actually handling the situation. The why could be that his parents wanted him to be a lawyer and so blame Scientology that he is not one, rather than the fact that he flunked out of law school and couldn't stand the thought of being a lawyer. Or perhaps the why is that the Scientologist keeps writing her parents for money, or the why could be that the mother has just read an Nth Theta newspaper article. In any case, the why should be found, and the PTS individual should then do whatever is necessary to handle. Handling. The person who is PTS should be declared as such by ethics and should not receive Scientology training or processing until the situation has been handled. The exception to this is a full PTS rundown done in the HGC. The handling could be as simple as writing to one's father and saying, "I do not complain that you are a janitor. Please do not complain that I am a Scientologist. The important thing is that I am your son and that I love and respect you. I know you love me, but please learn to respect me as an adult individual who knows what he wants in life." Or it could be as follows. "I am writing to you, Daddy, because Mother keeps sending me these dreadful newspaper clippings, and they are upsetting to me because I know they are not true. You do not do this, and so it is easier for me to write to you." Again, there are as many ways of handling as there are whys found. Each case is individual. Remember, too, there is always the possibility of a no situation. And if the person thinks he's PTS and isn't, he can get sick. Or if he insists he isn't and is, he can also get upset. So find if there is a situation first. It is the purpose of ethics to ensure that the situation is handled. Nothing in this material shall ever or under any circumstances justify any violations of the laws of the land or intentional legal or moral wrongs. PTSness and disconnection. Perhaps the most fundamental right of any being is the right to communicate. Without this freedom, other rights deteriorate. Communication, however, is a two-way flow. If one has the right to communicate, then one must also have the right to not receive communication from another. It is this latter corollary of the right to communicate that gives us our right to privacy. These rights are so basic that governments have written them into laws, witness the American Bill of Rights. However, groups have always regulated these rights to one degree or another. for with the freedom to communicate come certain agreements and responsibilities. An example of this is a marriage. In a monogamous society, the agreement is that one will be married to only one person at one time. That agreement extends to having second dynamic relations with one spouse and no one else. Thus, should wife Shirley establish a 2D type of communication line with someone other than her husband Pete, it is a violation of the agreement and postulates of the marriage. Pete has the right to insist that either this communication cease or that the marriage will cease. Handle or disconnect. In PTS tech, you'll see the phrase handle or disconnect. It means simply that. The term handle most commonly means, when used in relation to PTS tech, to smooth out a situation with another person by applying the tech of communication. The term disconnection is defined as a self-determined decision made by an individual that he is not going to be connected to another. It is a severing of a communication line. The basic principle of handle or disconnect exists in any group, and ours is no different. It is much like trying to deal with a criminal. If he will not handle, the society resorts to the only other solution. It disconnects the criminal from the society. In other words, they remove the guy from society and put him in a prison because he won't handle his problem, or otherwise cease to commit criminal acts against others. It's the same sort of situation that husband Pete is faced with in the example mentioned above. The optimum solution is to handle the situation with wife Shirley and her violations of their group marriage agreements. But if Pete cannot handle the situation, he is left with no other choice but to disconnect, sever the marriage communication lines, if only by separation. To do otherwise would be disastrous, for he is connected to someone antagonistic to the original agreements, postulates, and responsibilities of the group, the marriage. A Scientologist can become PTS by reason of being connected to someone that is antagonistic to Scientology or its tenets. In order to resolve the PTS condition, he either handles the other person's antagonism, as covered here and in full on the PTS-SP course, or as a last resort when all attempts to handle have failed, he disconnects from the person. He is simply exercising his right to communicate or not to communicate with a particular person. With our tech of handle or disconnect, we are, in actual fact, doing nothing different than any society or group or marriage down through thousands of years. History. Earlier, disconnection as a condition was cancelled. It had been abused by a few individuals who'd failed to handle situations which could have been handled, and who lazily or irresponsibly disconnected, thereby creating situations even worse than the original because it was the wrong action. Secondly, there were those who could survive only by living on our lines. They wanted to continue to be connected to Scientologists. See earlier the antisocial personality, the anti-Scientologist. Thus, they screamed to high heaven if anyone dared to apply the tech of handle or disconnect. This put Scientologists at a disadvantage. We cannot afford to deny Scientologists that basic freedom that is granted to everyone else, the right to choose whom one wishes to communicate with or not communicate with. It's bad enough that there are governments trying, through the use of force, to prevent people from disconnecting from them, witness those who want to leave some countries but can't. The bare fact is that disconnection is a vital tool in handling PTSness and can be very effective when used correctly. Therefore, the tech of disconnection was restored to use in the hands of those persons thoroughly and standardly trained in PTS-SP tech. Handling antagonistic sources. In the great majority of cases where a person has some family member or close associate who appears antagonistic to his getting better through Scientology, it is not really a matter of the antagonistic source wanting the PTS to not get better. It is most commonly a lack of correct information about Scientology that causes the problem or upset. In such a case, simply having the PTS disconnect would not help matters and would actually be a non-confront of the situation. It is quite common that the PTS has a low confront on the terminal and situation. This isn't hard to understand when one looks at these facts. A. To be PTS in the first place, the PTS must have committed overts against the antagonistic source, and B. When one has committed overts, his confront and responsibility drop. When an ethics officer finds that a Scientologist is PTS to a family member, he does not recommend that the person disconnect from the antagonistic source. The ethics officer's advice to the Scientologist is to handle. The handling for such a situation is to educate him in the tech of PTSness and suppression, and then skillfully and firmly guide the PTS through the steps needed to restore good communication with the antagonistic source. This eventually dissolves the situation by bringing about an understanding on the part of the antagonistic source as to what Scientology is and why the PTS person is interested and involved in it. Of course, when this is accomplished, you no longer have a PTS at all, and you may very well find a new Scientologist on your hands. The actual steps and procedure of this sort of handling are well covered in bulletins, policy letters, and lectures that comprise the full body of PTS-SP technology. Also see later outline of full PTS handling. When disconnection is used. An ethics officer can encounter a situation where someone is factually connected to a suppressive person in present time. This is a person whose normal operating basis is one of making others smaller, less able, less powerful. He does not want anyone to get better at all. In truth, an SP is absolutely, completely terrified of anyone becoming more powerful. In such an instance, the PTS isn't going to get anywhere trying to handle the person. The answer is to sever the connection. How to disconnect. How a disconnection is done depends on the circumstances. Example: the PC lives next door to, say, a psychiatric clinic and feels PTS due to this environment. The remedy is simple. The PC can move to another apartment in another location. He need not write any sort of disconnection letter to the psychiatric clinic. He simply changes his environment, which is, in effect, a disconnection from the suppressive environment. Example: a PC is connected to a person or group that has been declared suppressive by HCO in a published ethics order. He should disconnect, and if he wants to inform the SP of the fact, he may write a letter of disconnection. Such a letter would be very straightforward. It would state the fact of the disconnection and the reason for it. It would not be mis-emotional or accusative, since this would only serve to stir up further antagonism. The letter would be inspected by the ethics officer before it was sent, and copies kept for the PTS person's own ethics file and PC folder. No attempt would be made to establish communication with the declared SP to clear matters up or to seek to reform the SP. The SP's reform is strictly in the hands of HCO. The PTS simply disconnects. Example: one discovers that an employee at his place of business is an SP. He steals money, drives away customers, wipes out other employees, and will not correct no matter what you do. The handling is very simple. The PTS fires him, and that's the end of it right there. To fail or refuse to disconnect from a suppressive person not only denies the PTS case gain, it is also supportive of the suppressive, in itself a suppressive act, and it must be so labeled. See later, Suppressive Acts, Suppression of Scientology and Scientologists. Suppressed Person Rundown. There is, of course, another technical way to handle PTSs, and that is to get them through all problems they have had with the terminal involved, and the PTSness will disappear. See later, outline of full PTS handling. But it still requires that during the handling, the person disconnects. Summary. The technology of disconnection is essential in the handling of PTSs. It can and has saved lives and untold trouble and upset. It must be preserved and used correctly. Nothing in this material shall ever or under any circumstances justify any violations of the laws of the land. Any such offense shall subject the offender to penalties described by law, as well as to ethics and justice actions. Outline of full PTS handling. PTS situations can arise at any time during a person's Scientology auditing or training, and must be handled speedily and well to get the person back on his course of auditing or training. Many pre-clears new to Scientology require PTS handling as one of their first actions. Auditing or training must not be continued over an unhandled PTS situation, as processing or study under the duress of suppression will not produce results. You do not go on hoping or ignore it or call it something else or do any other action except handle. Handling PTSness is too easy to allow for any justification or excuse for not doing so, and the steps given below lay out the many handlings which can be used to bring about a full resolution of all PTSness in all PCs. Education. A person who is PTS is often the last person to suspect it. He may have become temporarily or momentarily so, and he may have become so very slightly. Or he may be very PTS and have been so for a long time, but he is nevertheless PTS, and we must educate him on the subject. PTS-CS1. The PTS-CS1, given in various bulletins, must be done before any other PTS handling is begun. This action sets a person up to understand his PTS situation and the mechanics of it. A thorough PTS-CS1 is the basis of all successful PTS handling. PTS interview. A metered PTS interview, as covered in various bulletins, will, in most cases, assist the person to spot the antagonistic or SP element. Once spotted, the potential trouble source must be assisted in working out a handling for that terminal, or more rarely the PTS may need to disconnect from that person. If any difficulty is encountered on this step, or if the SP cannot easily be found, the pre-clear or student is probably not PTS Type 1 and should be turned over to an auditor qualified to handle Type 2 PTS situations with more advanced PTS tech. Handling. Once the antagonistic terminal has been located, a handling is done to move the PTS person from effect to slight gentle cause over his situation. This handling is done per a program which will include whatever is needed to accomplish the result, and will of course vary depending on the person and his circumstances. When the antagonistic person exists in present time, in the physical universe, a good roads, good weather approach to the antagonistic terminal is usually what is needed. The handling must be agreed upon by the potential trouble source and the person assisting him, and must be tailored to put the person at cause over his particular situation. Handling may include coaching him along to see how he himself actually precipitated the PTS condition in the first place by not applying or by misapplying Scientology basics to his life and relationship with the now antagonistic terminal. Books, lectures, and films. It quite often happens that the persons antagonistic to the pre-clear have no real concept of what Scientology is. This can also be true of a very new Scientologist who then misinforms others. The book, What is Scientology, is a very useful tool. The pre-clear can send a copy of it to persons antagonistic to him, and it will give them hope that the person will respond better to life, or, if they are antagonistic to Scientology, can show them what they're being antagonistic to. Recommendations that the PTS person obtain and use this book, or anyone else who wants to inform his friends or get them on the right road, as the book was not written for the purpose of de-PTSing people, should be made by the interviewing officer. The book was specially priced so it would be more generally available, despite the high cost of publishing. It is a large and imposing book and contains the true answers to all the questions people might ask, and so saves the PTS person or any other person a great deal of explanation time. Scientology, The Fundamentals of Thought, and other basic books, lectures, and films, particularly the film Introduction to Scientology, are very useful tools. The pre-clear can send a copy of a book, lecture, or film to the antagonistic person, or he can bring the person into the local org to listen to a lecture or see a film. How to handle false data and lies. In some cases, antagonism stems from false data or outright lies that the antagonistic person has heard or read. The handling for this is based on the datum that truth must exist before lies, and truth blows the lie away as it is later on the chain. The handling for a person who has false data on Scientology is to fill in any vacuum of missing data with factual data about Scientology and to prove any lies, rumors, and false data encountered to be false. Any lies are disproven by documenting the truth. Packs documenting the falsity of common lies can be obtained through one's local org. Extraordinary successes in handling PTS situations with the Can We Ever Be Friends recording and booklet occur when these are used. Many parents, friends, relatives of Scientologists who, due to misunderstoods or misinformation, thought they were opposed to Scientology and its aims, have discovered after listening to this recording that they are in full agreement with it and now give Scientology their support. The results available with this recording cannot be underestimated. It can be used by itself when communication has really broken down between the two persons or in conjunction with other PTS handlings. Disconnection. In the rare cases where disconnection is validly indicated in order to handle the person's PTSdness, it should be done exactly per PTSdness and disconnection. PTS-SP course. A full and complete PTS handling would consist of getting the person through the PTS-SP course. This must be included as part of the handling, as otherwise the person will never learn the full mechanics of suppressive persons and why one becomes PTS. With the knowledge of PTS-SP technical data under his belt, a person can be at cause over suppressive persons and is far less likely to become PTS to anyone in the future. Further handlings. There are further handlings that can be done on PTSs which utilize Scientology processing. These are the PTS rundown and the suppressed person rundown. The PTS rundown is done when pre-clears who have had standard successful PTS handlings roller coaster at a later date become ill, slump after making gains, or continue to find additional terminals they are PTS to. Or it is done when the person doesn't brighten up with standard PTS handling, or when he isn't sure of the SP or can't name any SP at all. If, after the PTS rundown, the person feels fine but the persons suppressing him are still making trouble, then the PTS person must have a suppressed person rundown. The suppressed person rundown can produce the wondrous result of changing the disposition of an antagonistic terminal at a distance by auditing the PTS pre-clear. Where this terminal was antagonistic, invalidative, hostile, or downright suppressive, he can suddenly have a change of heart and seek to make peace with the PTS pre-clear. Summary of handling. Thus, any full and complete PTS handling consists of 1. Education. 2. PTS interview, discovering to what or whom he is PTS. 3. Handling, or in rare cases disconnection if warranted. 4. PTS-SP course, can be started earlier. 5. PTS rundown, if needed. 6. Suppressed person rundown, if needed. Policies on physical healing, insanity, and sources of trouble. It has been the long-standing policy of central organizations to handle physical illness and insanity in the following manner. Healing. Any process labeled healing, old or new, refers to healing by mental and spiritual means and should therefore be looked upon as the relief of difficulties arising from mental and spiritual causes. The proper procedure in being requested to heal some complained-of physical disability is as follows. 1. Require a physical examination from whatever practitioners of the physical healing arts may be competent and available. 2. Clearly establish that the disability does not stem from immediately physical causes. 3. If the disability is pronounced to be curable within the skill of the physical practitioner, and is in actual fact a disease or illness which surrenders to contemporary physical treatment, to require the person to be so treated before Scientology processing may be undertaken. 4. If, however, the physical practitioner's recommendation includes surgery or treatment of an unproven nature, or the illness or disease cannot be accurately diagnosed as a specific physical illness or disease with a known cure, the person may be accepted for processing on the reasonable assumption that no purely physical illness is proven to exist, and that it is probably mental or spiritual in origin. Policies regarding the insane. With insane persons or persons with a proven record of insanity, do the following. 1. Establish to the best of your ability within reasonable administrative limits and known tests that any HGC-PC accepted for processing does not have a history of deserved institutionalization in an insane asylum or similar place. 2. Process only those persons who have no such history. 3. Do not recommend any other treatment by practitioners in the field of insanity where there exists any evidence that such practitioners injure, disable, or maltreat patients by violently reacting drugs, by painful shocks, surgery, or other barbaric and outdated means of mental treatment. 4. If no recommendation is possible under 3 above, recommend only rest and a change of environment, but not in a professional capacity. Sources of trouble. Policies similar to those regarding physical illness and insanity exist for types of persons who have caused us considerable trouble. These persons can be grouped under sources of trouble. They include A. Persons intimately connected with persons, such as marital or familial ties, of known antagonism to mental or spiritual treatment or Scientology. In practice, such persons, even when they approach Scientology in a friendly fashion, have such pressure continually brought to bear upon them by persons with undue influence over them that they make very poor gains in processing, and their interest is solely devoted to proving the antagonistic element wrong. They, by experience, produce a great deal of trouble in the long run, as their own condition does not improve adequately under such stresses to effectively combat the antagonism. Their present-time problem cannot be reached, as it is continuous, and so long as it remains so, they should not be accepted for auditing by any organization or auditor. B. Criminals with proven criminal records often continue to commit so many undetected harmful acts between sessions that they do not make adequate case gains, and therefore should not be accepted for processing by organizations or auditors. C. Persons who have ever threatened to sue or embarrass or attack, or who have publicly attacked Scientology or been a party to an attack, and all their immediate families, should never be accepted for processing by a central organization or an auditor. They have a history of only serving other ends than case gain, and commonly again turn on the organization or auditor. They have already barred themselves out by their own overts against Scientology, and are thereafter too difficult to help, since they cannot openly accept help from those they have tried to injure. D. Responsible for condition cases have been traced back to other causes for their condition too often to be acceptable. By responsible for condition cases is meant the person who insists a book or some auditor is wholly responsible for the terrible condition I am in. Such cases demand unusual favors, free auditing, tremendous effort on the part of auditors. Review of these cases show that they were in the same or worse condition long before auditing, that they are using a planned campaign to obtain auditing for nothing, that they are not as bad off as they claim, and that their antagonism extends to anyone who seeks to help them, even their own families. Establish the rights of the matter and decide accordingly. E. Persons who are not being audited on their own determinism are a liability, as they are forced into being processed by some other person and have no personal desire to become better. Quite on the contrary, they usually want only to prove the person who wants them audited wrong, and so do not get better. Until a personally determined goal to be processed occurs, the person will not benefit. F. Persons who want to be processed to see if Scientology works, as their only reason for being audited have never been known to make gains, as they do not participate. News reporters fall into this category. They should not be audited. G. Persons who claim that if you help such and such a case, at great and your expense, because somebody is rich or influential or the neighbors would be electrified, should be ignored. Processing is designed for bettering individuals, not progressing by stunts or giving cases undue importance. Process only at convenience and usual arrangements. Make no extraordinary effort at the expense of other persons who do want processing for normal reasons. Not one of these arrangements has ever come off successfully, as it has the unworthy goal of notoriety, not betterment. H. Persons who have an open mind but no personal hopes or desires for auditing or knowingness should be ignored, as they really don't have an open mind at all, but a lack of ability to decide about things, and are seldom found to be very responsible and waste anyone's efforts to convince them. I. Persons who do not believe anything or anyone can get better. They have a purpose for being audited entirely contrary to the auditors, and so, in this conflict, do not benefit. When such persons are trained, they use their training to degrade others. Thus, they should not be accepted for training or auditing. J. Persons attempting to sit in judgment on Scientology in hearings or attempting to investigate Scientology should be given no undue importance. One should not seek to instruct or assist them in any way. This includes judges, boards, newspaper reporters, magazine writers, etc. All efforts to be helpful or instructive have done nothing beneficial, as their first idea is a firm, "I don't know," and this usually ends with an equally firm, "I don't know." If a person can't see for himself or judge from the obvious, then he does not have sufficient powers of observation even to sort out actual evidence. In legal matters, only take the obvious effective steps. Carry on no crusades in court. In the matter of reporters, etc., it is not worthwhile to give them any time, contrary to popular belief. They are given their story before they leave their editorial rooms, and you only strengthen what they have to say by saying anything. They are no public communication line that sways much. Policy is very definite. Ignore. To summarize sources of trouble, the policy in general is to cut communication, as the longer it is extended, the more trouble they are. I know of no case where the types of persons listed above were handled by auditing or instruction. I know of many cases where they were handled by firm legal stands, by ignoring them until they changed their minds, or just turning one's back. In applying such a policy of cut communication, one must also use judgment, as there are exceptions in all things, and to fail to handle a person's momentary upset in life, or with us, can be quite fatal. So these policies refer to non-Scientology persons in the main, or persons who appear on the outer fringes and push toward us. When such a person bears any of the above designations, we and the many are better off to ignore them. Scientology works. You don't have to prove it to everyone. People don't deserve to have Scientology as a divine right, you know. They have to earn it. This has been true in every philosophy that sought to better man. And the less in turbulence you put on your lines, the better and the more people you will eventually help. The stress of policy. All the above sources of trouble are also forbidden training, and when a person being trained or audited is detected to belong under the above headings A to J, he or she should be advised to terminate and accept refund, which must be paid at once, and the full explanation should be given them at that time. Thus the few may not, in their own turmoil, impede service to and the advance of the many. Scientology is an applied religious philosophy designed and developed to make the able more able. In this sphere, it is tremendously successful. Efforts to involve philosophy with medical imperialism, psychiatric sadism, the bigoted churchmen, bring about a slowing of our progress. These people are sick spiritually because of their own continuous harmful actions against patients and the society, and are beyond our normal means to help. These policies will continue in existence until such time as those interested care to invest the time and treasure necessary to build the institutions and re-educate the professions which now practice medical and physical mental healing. And this is definitely not within our time, but would belong to some remote future when more men are sane. However, such a program would depend upon the continued existence of the medical imperialist and the psychiatrist, and as their more reprehensible activities are rather new and very radical, they may be abandoned by public and government long before Scientology could help them. This is probably the more likely occurrence, as even in Russia the communist has now forsworn all violent treatments of the insane, according to their delegates to the London Medical Conference of this year. The year being referred to is 1964. And Russian practitioners look with contempt and scorn upon the Western psychiatrist. The medical doctor of England, taken over by socialism, has lost his ambition for medical imperialism and has no contest with Scientology. In the United States, the American Medical Association has become locked in mortal combat with the government and probably will be socialized entirely in a few years due to fee abuses and lack of gains. The medical doctor remains strong only in more backward small nations such as Australia, where world trends are late in arriving. Even the Church in Rome is considering a surrender of principles and amalgamation with other faiths in an effort to save a dwindling religious membership. Thus there may be no medical practitioner as we know him left in a few decades. Membership in the psychiatric profession is declining. In the place of these institutions, if we ever get around to them, we may find ourselves dealing with completely different practices in the fields of physical healing and the treatment of the insane. All we ask of them is that they are competent in their treatments and less greedy for monopoly than their predecessors. And if this is so, then our policies will then remain fully in force, but in a spirit of cooperation, not with the desire to protect ourselves and the public from them and the products of their bungling. Ours are the powerful communication lines. They are powerful because they are theta lines. And theta and turbulated theta obtains all its apparent power by being parasitic on theta lines. Only when you add the power of our lines to the weakness of n-theta lines can they then have strength. Example, it was the FCDC communication to its own field about that government raid that A, cost the most in cash and B, did the most damage. Government raid refers to a 1963 raid by the United States Food and Drug Administration in which e-meters and literature from the founding Church of Scientology in Washington, D.C. were seized under the bogus allegation that these were being presented to the public as medical cures. Ultimately, however, the Church not only emerged victorious with sweeping recognition of religious bona fides, but the court ordered the return of all seized materials. You can actually ignore an n-theta line in almost all cases without the faintest consequence. It only has power when we let it have power by answering it. Chapter 9. Ethics in Scientology Organizations. Scientology makes a safe environment. We're working to provide a safe environment for Scientology and Scientologists in orgs everywhere. The dangerous environment of the world, of injustice, sudden dismissals, war, atomic bombs, will only persist and trouble us if we fail to spread our safe environment across the world. It starts with our own orgs. They must be safe environments. Only good tech and justice can make the org environment safe. Like an auditing room, we must be able to work undisturbed by the madness at our doors. We can make every org a safe island, and then by expanding and joining those orgs, bring peace and a safe environment to all the world. It not only can be done, it is happening this moment. Push it along. Support policy, good tech, and justice. Why ethics? You can't run pre-clears without ethics to hand. Technical fact. Particularly on lower-level processes and also on higher-level processes, the potential trouble source, connected to a suppressive, will go to pieces under auditing, not improve. Current statistic on this is 20% PTS or mild SP, and of this 2.5% is very vicious suppressive person. Your Director of Training, D of T, can't train a class that has a PTS or SP in it. Your Director of Processing, D of P, can't audit people if he can't handle this PTS and SP factor efficiently. Your Director of Review will go round the bend if he can't shunt PTSs or SPs to ethics. He'll have to become the ethics officer. This is not policy I am talking about. It is technical fact. It just can't be done and never will be possible on lower technology and requires fantastic skill to get a real gain even with higher-level processes. So accept this technical fact, and you'll understand both ethics and all your case failures. With no available ethics officer to take PTSs or SPs off the lines and handle, by spotting and using standard policy actions, your traffic will thin, your jobs will be a burden, and the org will fail. The whole staff has to know the ethics drill and follow it. Ethics is for the public far more than staff. You must use the drill. A supervisor to whom a student is impolite must send the student to ethics. If the student is slow, the supervisor must send to review for special attention at the student's expense. Staff auditors finding a PC savage or unchanging must send to review, which probably sends to ethics. Staff auditors finding a case failing must send to review, which again may send to ethics. The ultimate in dumbness is the person who thinks ethics is to make PCs answer questions, or the person who thinks it is for espionage on staff members. Ethics is a long-arm part of technology, and incidentally spots PTSs and SPs who get onto staffs, as they sometimes do. Ethics is a fine-edged tool, a vital part of an org if one wishes to train people in Scientology or process them successfully. If tech is out, ethics will get tech in. If ethics is out, tech won't ever go in. It's like that. I learned this the hard way. Let's hope others learn it on easier channels. The ARC broke PC or ARC broke student is 95% ethics type. That's the discovery. Use it. If you have ethics in, the 80% will flow through the organization in a mad torrent. Indicators of orgs. Just as PCs have indicators, so do orgs. There is a probable long list of good indicators. When these are present, ethics is quiet and hangs on to an interrogation, etc., only long enough to get policy and technology in. There is a probable long list of bad indicators. When these are present, ethics becomes industrious in ratio to the number of bad indicators. The first indicators, good or bad, are statistics, the Organization Information Center, OIC, graphs for units, sections, departments, divisions, and the org. When these are rising, the rise is a good indicator. When these are falling, the fall is a bad indicator. The second of these indicators, good or bad, are technical gains. When technology is in, cases are gaining. This is a good indicator. When technology is out, cases are losing. This is a bad indicator. Ethics only exists to hold the fort long enough and settle things down enough to get technology in. Ethics is never carried on for its own sake. It is pushed home only until technology is functioning, and then technology resolves matters and ethics prowls off looking for other targets. We don't hang people because we started to hang them and so must do so. We start to hang people and keep right on tying the noose in a workmanlike fashion right up to the instant we can get tech in, which of course makes the noose unnecessary. But if tech never does get in, then we complete the hanging. You will find if you label a suppressive, you will someday get him back and get tech in on him. If you don't ever label, they wander off and get lost. Labeling as a suppressive is our hanging. When things are bad, bad indicators heavily visible. Putting a body on the gallows is very salutary. We call it putting a head on a pike. Too many bad indicators and too goofed up a situation, and we must put a head on a pike. Then things simmer down and we can begin to get tech in. That's the whole purpose of ethics, to get tech in. And we use enough to do so to get correct standard tech in and being done. When there are lots of bad indicators about, low and falling statistics, goofed cases, we get very handy with our interrogatories and put the place very nearly under martial law. We call this a state of emergency. Once emergency is declared, you usually have to put a head or two on a pike to convince people that you mean it. After that, necessity level rises and the place straightens up. If an emergency is continued beyond a reasonable time, we resort to very heavy discipline and ComEv the executives who wouldn't get off it. Ethics, then, is applied to the degree required to produce the result of getting tech in. Once tech is really in on a person, with a case gain, or a tech division, let us say, and auditors actually audit standard processes by the book, we know it will resolve and we ease off with ethics. Ethics, then, is the tool by which you get good indicators in by getting tech in. Ethics is the steamroller which smooths the highway. Once the road is open, we are quite likely to skip remaining investigation and let it all be. But somebody promising to be good is never good enough. We want statistics, bettered statistics. Symptoms of organizations. Orgs have various symptoms which tell us how things really are, ethic-wise. One of these is dilettantism. Dilettantism. Dilettante means one who interests himself in an art or science merely as a pastime and without serious study. In an org, this manifests itself with, people should live a little, one needs a rest from Scientology, one should do something else too, all that kind of jazz. It also manifests itself in non-consecutive scheduling, part-time students, because things are different in this town and people can come only 2 nights. Ask what they do with other nights. Bowling, horse racing. Boy, you better maul the case folders of staff. You have a suppressive aboard, maybe 6. Scientology that saves lives is a modern miracle is being compared to bowling. Get it? That org or portion just isn't serious. Scientology is an idle club to it, an old ladies' sewing circle. And to somebody, signing people up for training and auditing are just con games they put over on the public. Suppressives. Root them out. Wild rumors. This symptom is caused by potential trouble sources. Find whose case roller coasters, gets better, gets worse. Investigate. You'll find a suppressive or two outside the org. Put a head on a pike with an HCO ethics order and publish it widely. ARC broken field. Appoint a ComEv chairman to inquire into matters and form a list of interested parties based on reports he will now receive. Bad tech. When results just don't happen in the Academy, HGC, or Review, one or another, look for the potential trouble sources and suppressives. Only they can keep tech out. Put a big head on a pike and then begin to interrogate every slip in the place. Suddenly, tech is in again. There are many such symptoms. At the root of every bad condition will be found a suppressive person. Locate your potential trouble sources by locating passers of rumors, etc. Then locate the suppressive and shoot. Calm reigns, tech is in. And that's all one means to accomplish. Today, technology works on every case. If the local org can't handle a case, higher orgs can. If you get tech in well enough in an org, tech handles all, beautifully. But if it is out, only ethics can bat down the reasons it can't be gotten in. Optimum state. The optimum state of an org is so high that there is no easy way to describe it. All cases getting cracked, releases and clears by the hundreds, command of the environment. Big. That's an optimum state for any org. If it isn't rising toward optimum today, it is locally being held down. The viewpoint of ethics is there is no adequate reason why an org is stumbling except ethics reasons. Let others take care of any other lacks. Ethics never gets reasonable about lack of expansion. If ethics shoves hard enough, others will get a high enough necessity level to act. So when an org is low, find out where its statistics are down and who is a PTS or an SP, and act. That's the job of ethics. Thus, little by little, we take off the brakes for a cleared earth. Ethics Officer Hat. This is a quick outline of the activities of the ethics officer. The purpose of the ethics officer is to help Ron clear orgs and the public, if need be, of N-theta and N-turbulation so that Scientology can be done. The activities of the ethics officer consist of isolating individuals who are stopping proper flows by pulling withholds with ethics technology and by removing as necessary potential trouble sources and suppressive individuals off org comm lines, and by generally enforcing ethics codes. The technology of how this is done is quite precise. In a nutshell, A, one finds an imperfect functioning of some portion of the org, and then B, finds something that one doesn't understand about it, and then C, interrogates by dispatch the individuals in that portion connected with the imperfect functioning. Just those 3 steps done over and over are usually quite enough to keep an org running quite smoothly. On first taking over post in an interbulated org, or in viewing a portion of the org in an interbulated condition, the actions of the ethics officer consist of 1. Run back N-theta by asking for names of who said it to the person who is now saying it. 2. Locate those persons and find out who told them. And then 3. Look amongst those names for no case change or for potential trouble sources. Bill voices a rumor, usually with a they say. The ethics officer asks Bill what they's name is. Bill thinks and finally says it was Pete. The ethics officer locates Pete and asks Pete who told him, and when Pete says they, the ethics officer finds out what they's name is. Pete says it was Agnes. Ethics officer locates Agnes. Agnes maintains it is true and can't say who said it. Ethics officer looks up Agnes's case folder or puts Agnes on a meter and sees by high or very low TA that he has a suppressive. Or he finds Agnes has a suppressive husband and that she is a potential trouble source. The ethics officer then handles it as per ethics policy letters. In short, rumor comes from somewhere. The somewhere is a potential trouble source or a suppressive. One runs it down and applies the remedies contained in ethics HCO policy letters to that person. An ethics officer's first job is usually cleaning up the org of its potential trouble sources and requesting a ComEv for the suppressives. That gets things in focus quickly and smooths an org down so it will function. Then one looks for down statistics in the Organization Information Center, OIC, charts. These aren't understandable, of course, so one interrogates by sending interrogatories to the people concerned. In their answers, there will be something that doesn't make sense at all to the ethics officer. Example: We can't pay the bills because Josie has been on course. The ethics officer is only looking for something he himself can't reconcile. So he sends interrogatories to the person who wrote it and to Josie. Sooner or later, some wild withhold or even a crime shows up when one does this. The trick of this org auditing is to find a piece of string sticking out, something one can't understand, and by interrogatories, pull on it. A small cat shows up. Pull with some more interrogatories. A baby gorilla shows up. Pull some more. A tiger appears. Pull again, and wow, you've got a General Sherman tank. It isn't reasonable for people to be lazy or stupid. At the bottom, you find the real cause of no action in a portion of an org or continuous upset. When you have your General Sherman, call a court of ethics on it, or take action. But in actual fact, you have probably already fixed it up. There's always a reason behind a bad statistic. Send out interrogatories until you have the real reason in view. It will never be, Agnes isn't bright. It is more likely, Agnes is on a typing post but never knew how to type. Or worse, the Director of Processing, DFP, audits org PCs for his own profit. Or the Director of Training, DFT, simply never comes to work. The real explanation of a down statistic is always a very easily understood thing. If you interrogate enough, you'll get the real explanation, and then you can act. Never use conduct for anything but an indicator of what you should interrogate. Never buy rumors as generalities. Somebody said them, and that somebody has a name. Get the name. Filing. Filing is the real trick of ethics work. The files do all the work, really. Executive ethics reports patiently filed in folders, one for each staff member, eventually makes one file fat. There's your boy. Call up a court of ethics on him, and his area gets smooth. Whatever report you get, file it with a name. Don't file by departments or divisions. File by names. The files do 90% of the work. When one file gets fat, call the person up for ethics action. Time machine. Run a time machine and let it accumulate data for you. The orders that fall off of it that weren't complied with should be reported to the senior issuing them. But file those noncompliances. Soon a file gets fat and we know why the org isn't running in one of its portions. Policy. All ethics policy applies to the actions of an ethics officer. But the above is his workaday world, auditor to the org, filing his replies, watching for the fat file and then calling a court on it. That way an org soon begins to run like a well-greased river, doing its job in a happy atmosphere. Be as sudden and swift and unreasonable as you like. You aren't there to win a popularity contest. Make executives report all those ethics items they should. Make them write their orders and send you a copy. Make your comm center give you the responses for pairing with the copies. File carefully and call the lightning down on the person who gets a fat ethics file. It's an easy job, mostly admin, but so is all intelligence work. The files do the job if you make people report and if you file well yourself. And when you feel exasperated and balked and feel like taking it out on somebody, do so by all means. Who ever heard of a tame ethics officer? The sanity of the planet is all that is at stake. Ethics protection. Ethics actions must parallel the purposes of Scientology and its organizations. Ethics exists primarily to get technology in. Tech can't work unless ethics is already in. When tech goes out, ethics can, and is expected to, get it in. For the purpose of Scientology, amongst others, is to apply Scientology. Therefore, when tech is in, ethics actions tend to be dropped. Ethics continues its actions until tech is in, and as soon as it is, backs off and only acts if tech goes out again. The purpose of the org is to get the show on the road and keep it going. This means production. Every division is a production unit. It makes or does something that can have a statistic to see if it goes up or down. Example, a typist gets out 500 letters in 1 week. That's a statistic. If the next week the same typist gets out 600 letters, that's an up statistic. If the typist gets out 300 letters, that's a down statistic. Every post in an org can have a statistic. So does every portion of the org. The purpose is to keep production, statistics, up. This is the only thing that gives a good income for the staff member personally. When statistics go down or when things are so organized you can't get one for a post, the staff member's pay goes down as the org goes down in its overall production. The production of an organization is only the total of its individual staff members. When these have down statistics, so does the org. Ethics actions are often used to handle down individual statistics. A person who is not doing his job becomes an ethics target. Conversely, if a person is doing his job, and his statistic will show that, ethics is considered to be in and the person is protected by ethics. As an example of the proper application of ethics to the production of an org, let us say the letter registrar has a high statistic, gets out lots of effective mail. Somebody reports the letter registrar for rudeness. Somebody else reports the letter registrar for irregular conduct with a student. Somebody else reports the letter registrar for leaving all the lights on. Proper ethics officer action means look up the general statistics of the letter registrar and seeing that they average quite high, file the complaints with a yawn. As the second example of ethics application to the production of an org, let us say a course supervisor has a low statistic. Very few students moved out of his course number growing, hardly anyone graduating, a bad academy statistic. Somebody reports this course supervisor for being late for work. Somebody else reports him for no weekly AdCom report, and bang! Ethics looks up the person, calls for an ethics hearing with trimmings. We are not in the business of being good boys and girls. We're in the business of going free and getting the org production roaring. Nothing else is of any interest then to ethics but A, getting tech in, getting it run and getting it run right, and B, getting production up and the org roaring along. Therefore, if a staff member is getting production up by having his own statistic excellent, ethics sure isn't interested. But if a staff member isn't producing, shown by his bad statistic for his post, ethics is fascinated with his smallest misdemeanor. In short, a staff member can get away with murder so long as his statistic is up and can't sneeze without a chop if it's down. To do otherwise is to permit some suppressive person to simply ethics chit every producer in the org out of existence. When people do start reporting a staff member with a high statistic, what you investigate is the person who turned in the report. In an ancient army, a particularly brave deed was recognized by an award of the title of Kakan. It was not a rank. The person remained what he was, but he was entitled to be forgiven the death penalty 10 times in case in the future he did anything wrong. That was a Kakan. That's what producing high statistic staff members are, Kakans. They can get away with murder without a blink from ethics. The average fair-to-poor statistic staff member, of course, gets just routine ethics with hearings or courts for too many misdeeds. The low statistic fellow gets a court if he sneezes. Ethics must use all org discipline only in view of the production statistic of the staff member involved. And ethics must recognize a Kakan when it sees one and tear up the bad report chits on the person with a yawn. To the staff member, this means if you do your job, you are protected by ethics. Rewards and penalties. How to handle personnel and ethics matters. The whole decay of Western government is explained in this seemingly obvious law. When you reward down statistics and penalize up statistics, you get down statistics. If you reward non-production, you get non-production. When you penalize production, you get non-production. The welfare state can be defined as that state which rewards non-production at the expense of production. Let us not then be surprised that we all turn up at last slaves in a starved society. The Soviet Union could not even feed herself, but depended on conquest to eke out an existence. And don't think they didn't strip the conquered. They had to. Oddly enough, one of the best ways to detect a suppressive person is that he or she stamps on up statistics and condones or rewards down statistics. It makes an SP very happy for everyone to starve to death, for the good worker to be shattered and the bad worker patted on the back. Draw your own conclusions as to whether or not Western governments or welfare states became at last suppressives. For they used the law used by suppressives. If you reward non-production, you get non-production. Although all this is very obvious to us, it seems to have been unknown, overlooked, or ignored by 20th century governments. In the conduct of our own affairs in all matters of rewards and penalties, we pay sharp heed to the basic laws as above and use this policy. We award production and up statistics and penalize non-production and down statistics, always. Also, we do it all by statistics, not rumor or personality or who knows who, and we make sure everyone has a statistic of some sort. We promote by statistic only. We penalize down statistics only. The whole of government as government was only a small bit of a real organization. It was an ethics function plus a tax function plus a disbursement function. This is about 3/100ths of an organization. A 20th century government was just these three functions gone mad, yet they made the whole population wear the hat of government. We must learn and profit from what they did wrong. And what they mainly did wrong was reward the down statistic and penalize the up statistic. The hard worker earner was heavily taxed, and the money was used to support the indigent. This was not humanitarian. It was only given humanitarian reasons. The robbed person was investigated exclusively, rarely the robber. The head of government who got into the most debt became a hero. War rulers were deified and peacetime rulers forgotten, no matter how many wars they prevented. Thus went ancient Greece, Rome, France, the British Empire, and the U.S. This was the decline and fall of every great civilization on this planet. They eventually rewarded the down statistic and penalized the up statistic. That's all that caused their decline. They came at last into the hands of suppressives and had no technology to detect them or escape their inevitable disasters. Thus, when you think of processing Joe to make a good DFP out of him and get him over his mistakes, forget it. That rewards a down statistic. Instead, find an auditor with an up statistic, reward it with processing, and make him the DFP. Never promote a down statistic or demote an up statistic. Never even hold a hearing on someone with an up statistic. Never accept an ethics chit on one. Just stamp it, sorry, up statistic, and send it back. But someone with a steadily down statistic, investigate. Accept and convert any ethics chit to a hearing. Look for an early replacement. Gruesomely, in my experience, I have only seldom raised a chronically down statistic with orders or persuasion or new plans. I have only raised them with changes of personnel. So don't even consider someone with a steadily down statistic as part of the team. Investigate, yes. Try, yes. But if it stays down, don't fool about. The person is drawing pay and position and privilege for not doing his job, and that's too much reward even there. Don't get reasonable about down statistics. They are down because they are down. If someone were on the post, they would be up, and act on that basis. Any duress leveled by ethics should be reserved for down statistics. We even investigate social areas of down statistic. Psychiatry's cures are 0. The negative statistic of more insane is all that is up. So investigate and hang. If we reverse the conduct of declining governments and businesses, we will of course grow. And that makes for coffee and cakes, promotion, higher pay, better working quarters, and tools for all those who earn them. And who else should have them? If you do it any other way, everyone starves. We are peculiar in believing there is a virtue in prosperity. You cannot give more to the indigent than the society produces. When the society, by penalizing production, at last produces very little and yet has to feed very many, revolutions, confusion, political unrest, and dark ages ensue. In a very prosperous society where production is amply rewarded, there is always more left over than is needed. I well recall in prosperous farm communities that charity was ample and people didn't die in the ditch. That only happens where production is already low and commodity or commerce already scarce. Scarcity of commercial means of distribution is also a factor in depressions. The cause of the Great Depression of the 1920s and 1930s in the U.S. and England has never been pointed out by welfare statesmen. The cause was income tax and government interference with companies and, all during the 1800s, a gradual rise of nationalism and size of governments and their budgets, and no commercial development to distribute goods to the common people, catering to royal governments or only a leisure class still being the focus of production. Income tax so penalized management, making it unrewarded, and company law so hampered financing that it ceased to be really worthwhile to run companies, and management quit. In Russia, management went into politics in desperation. Kings were always decreeing the commoner couldn't have this or that. It put the commoner statistic up. And not until 1930 did anyone really begin to sell to the people with heavy advertising. It was Madison Avenue, radio, TV, and Bing Crosby, not the great Roosevelt who got the U.S. out of the Depression. England, not permitting wide radio coverage, did not come out of it, and her empire is dust. England still too firmly held the aristocratic tradition that the commoner mustn't possess to truly use her population as a market. But the reason they let it go this way, and the reason the Great Depression occurred, and the reason for the decline of the West is this one simple truth. If you reward non-production, you get it. It is not humanitarian to let a whole population go to pieces just because a few refuse to work, and some people just won't. And when work no longer has reward, none will. It is far more humane to have enough so everyone can eat. So specialize in production and everybody wins. Reward it. There is nothing really wrong with socialism helping the needy. Sometimes it is vital, but the reasons for that are more or less over. It is a temporary solution, easily overdone, and, like communism, is simply old-fashioned today. If carried to extremes like drinking coffee or absinthe or even eating, it becomes quite uncomfortable and oppressive. And today, socialism and communism have been carried far too far, and now only oppress up statistics and reward down ones. By the way, the natural law given here is the reason Scientology goes poorly when credit is extended by orgs and when auditors won't require proper donations. With credit and no donation, we are rewarding down statistics with attention and betterment as much as we reward up statistics in the society. A pre-clear who can work and produces as a member of society deserves, of course, priority. He naturally is the one who can pay. When we give the one who can't pay just as much attention, we are rewarding a down social statistic with Scientology. And of course, we don't expand because we don't expand the ability of the able. In proof, the most expensive thing you can do is process the insane, and these have the lowest statistic in the society. The more you help those in the society with low statistics, the more tangled affairs will get. The orgs require fantastic attention to keep them there at all when we reward low society statistics with training and processing. The worker pays his way. He has a high statistic. So give him the best in training and processing, not competition with people who don't work and don't have any money. Always give the best service to the person in society who does his job. By not extending credit, you tend to guarantee the best service to those with the best statistics, and so everyone wins again. None are owed processing or training. We are not an earth-wide amends project. No good worker owes his work. That's slavery. We don't owe because we do better. One would owe only if one did worse. Not everyone realizes how socialism penalizes an up statistic. Take health taxes. If an average man adds up what he pays the government, he will find his visits to medicos are very expensive. The one who benefits is only the chronically ill, whose way is paid by the healthy. So the chronically ill, down statistic, are rewarded with care paid for by penalties on the healthy, up statistic. In income tax, the more a worker makes, the more hours of his work week are taxed away from him. Eventually, he is no longer working for his reward. He is working for no pay. Therefore, people tend to refuse higher pay, up statistics. It has a penalty that is too great. On the other hand, a totally indigent non-working person is paid well just to loaf. The up statistic person cannot hire any small services to help his own prosperity, as he is already paying it via the government to somebody who doesn't work. Socialisms pay people not to grow crops, no matter how many are starving. Get it? So the law holds. Charity is charity. It benefits the donor, giving him a sense of superiority and status. It is a liability to the receiver, but he accepts it as he must and vows, if he has any pride, to cease being poor and get to work. Charity cannot be enforced by law and arrest, for then it is extortion and not charity. And get no idea that I beat any drum for capitalism. That, too, is old hat. Capitalism is the economics of living by non-production. It, by exact definition, is the economics of living off interest from loans, which is an extreme of rewarding non-production. Imperialism and colonialism are also bad, as they exist by enslaving the population of less strong countries. And that, too, is getting a reward for non-production, like they did in Victorian England from all the colonies. Parasitism is parasitism. Whether high or low, it is unlovely. All these isms are almost equally nutty, and their inheritors, if not their originators, were all of a stamp: suppressive. All I beat the drum for is that the working worker deserves a break, and the working manager deserves his pay, and the successful company deserves the fruits of its success. Only when success is bought by enslavement, or rewards are given to bums or thieves, will you find me objecting. This is a new look. It is an honest look. Reward the up statistic and damn the down, and we'll all make out. Discipline, SPs, and admin. How statistics crash. One of the ways an SP works to stop an activity or to halt an affluence is to pick out key personnel and spread wild, false, and alarming stories about them. Another way, often used in conjunction with the above, is to pound a key executive with alarming N-theta about staff, divisions, or activities. This urges the key executive to take uncalled-for action, which upsets things and which may lead to the dismissal of valuable staff. Also, it is a symptom of an org under external pressure to come down on its own personnel rather than on the public or on real SPs. SPs tend to vanish in memory since they speak in generalities. Always, everyone, salt their language so that when you say, "Who told you?" in tracing a rumor, it is hard to remember since everyone seems to have said it. Actually, the SP who did say it used everyone in his comm so often as to become in memory everyone. A good manager ignores rumor and only acts on statistics. Had I heeded over the years any rumor monger, we would have no orgs. I generally don't listen, and if I do, only go so far as inspecting stats. It is easy to discipline staff and hard to discipline the public. A lazy executive only disciplines staff. It takes more confront to tackle the public. When an executive listens to rumor and bad things about his fellow staff members without looking at the actual production statistics, that executive can harm the org badly. I have never tried to make staff members be good. I have only tried to make them produce and wear their hats. Our whole statistics system exists to end excessive discipline of valuable staff members. To me, a staff member whose stats are up can do no wrong. I am not interested in WOG morality. I am only interested in getting the show on the road and keeping it there. Also, I detest having to discipline anyone for anything, particularly a Scientologist. And the only discipline I use is to hold the fort until people are clear enough to see the light. They always do. All misconduct comes from aberration. However, if anyone is getting industrious trying to interbulate or stop Scientology or its activities, I can make Captain Bligh look like a Sunday school teacher. There is probably no limit on what I would do to safeguard man's only road to freedom against persons who, disdaining processing, seek to stop Scientology or hurt Scientologists. I well know man's fixation on trying to make everybody good, which means really inactive. The best men I have had in wars routinely have been continually arrested and generally frowned on by shore patrols, military police, etc. To the body politic, a quiet person is the ideal. When the guns begin to go, these quiet ones are all hiding, and only the active ones are there to fight. I often wonder what would happen to a state if it did achieve its apparent goal of making one and all inactive little sheep. So I don't care what men or women do if they just wear their hats and keep their stats up. Only when Scientology is being slowed or stopped do you find me rigging up the tools of discipline. In actual fact, I rather hold the person who is inactive because he is afraid of punishment in contempt, I respect only those who are strong enough to be decent without the self-protection of evil. I use discipline to hold the edges of a channel, not to stop the flow. SPs love to coax those with power to slay. As the basic ambition of any SP is, everybody dead so I can be safe, he or she will use all manner of lies and mechanisms to excite a thirst for discipline in those in power. If I ever heed any kill everybody advice, it is to put the advisor up against a brick wall. All evil stems from aberration, and it can be pretty evil, and awfully aberrated. The only road out from evil is processing. Therefore, one must protect the road to freedom as the answer to evil, and must protect as well all those who are working to keep the road in. The world will never become good because of discipline or oppression of evil. All discipline presupposes that the person being disciplined wants to survive. The truly evil only want to succumb. So discipline threat is no answer. The truly evil love pain and suffering and deprivation. So it coerces nothing and improves nothing when you seek to solve all evil with discipline. Only the already decent can be disciplined. It only obliges the evil ones. So all you can do really is to get the evil ones parked off the lines. The executive, in disciplining, is concerned with those who would stop or hinder the flow, and those who are just plain idle or stupid. So he severely leaves alone all upstats and only acts to move the suppressives off the lines and not let the idle and stupid slow the flow. An executive could never make the world reform by discipline alone. He can by processing. So his only use of discipline is to continue to make processing possible. It's as simple as that. Ethics, the design of. It is very easy for a staff member and even an ethics officer to completely misunderstand ethics and its functions. In a society run by SPs and controlled by incompetent police, the citizen almost engrammically identifies any justice action or symbol with oppression. Yet in the absence of true ethics, no one can live with others and stats go down inevitably. So a justice function must exist to protect producers and decent people. To give you an example, when a little boy this life, the neighborhood a block around and the road from home to school were unusable. A bully about 5 years older than I, named Leon Brown, exerted a very bad influence over other children. With extortion by violence and blackmail and with corruption, he made the area very dangerous. The road to school was blocked by the 5 O'Connell kids, ranging from 7 to 15, who stopped and beat up any smaller child. One couldn't go to school safely and was hounded by the truant officer, a hulking brute complete with star, if one didn't go to school. When I was about 6, I got very tired of a bloody nose and spankings because my clothes were torn, and avidly learned lumberjack fighting, a crude form of judo from my grandfather. With this superior tech under my belt, I searched out and found alone the youngest O'Connell kid, a year older than I, and pulverized him. Then I found alone and took on the next in size and pulverized him. After that, the O'Connell kids, all 5, fled each time I showed up, and the road to school was open, and I convoyed other little kids, so it was safe. Then one day, I got up on a 9-foot-high board fence and waited until the 12-year-old bully passed by and leaped off on him, boots and all, and after the dust settled, that neighborhood was safe for every kid in it. So I learned about justice. Kids would come from blocks away to get help in their neighborhood. Finally, for a mile around, it was a safe environment for kids. From this, I learned 2 lessons. 1, strength is nothing without skill and tech, and reversely, without skill and tech, the strength of brutes is a matter of contempt. 2, strength has 2 sides, one for good and one for evil. It is the intention that makes the difference. On further living, I found that only those who sought only peace were ever butchered. The thousands of years of Jewish passivity earned them nothing but slaughter. So things do not run right because one is holy or good. Things run right because one makes them run right. Justice is a necessary action to any successful society. Without it, the brute attacks the weak, the decent, and the productive. There are people who suppress. They are few. They often rise up to being in charge and then all things decay. They are essentially psychopathic personalities. Such want position in order to kill. Such as Genghis Khan, Hitler, psychiatrists, psychopathic criminals want power only to destroy. Covertly or overtly, they pay only with death. They arrived where they arrived, in charge of things, because nobody, when they were on their way up, said no. They are monuments to the cowards, the reasonable people who didn't put period to them while they were still only small bullies and still vulnerable. Ethics has to get there before tech can occur. So when it doesn't exist or goes out, then tech doesn't occur and suppression sets in and death follows. So if someone doesn't hold the line, all become victims of oppression. 2 sections. The ethics section is in Department 3. This department is called Inspection and Reports. In small orgs, there is only one person in that department. Primarily, his duties consist of inspecting and reporting to his divisional head and the Executive Council, EC. That is the first section's function. When inspection reveals outness and reports, such as graphs or direct info to the EC, do not result in correction, then it is a matter for the second section. The second section of Department 3 is Ethics. Now it is an ethics matter. If correctly reported outnesses that threaten the org are not corrected, then one assumes that suppression exists. Because he has files of damage reports and chits, and because he can see and investigate, the ethics officer locates who is causing outnesses and suppressing the org. By condition assignments, publication, and ComEvs, he gets in ethics. It occasionally happens that it is someone high up in the org. It sometimes happens his seniors or the EC scold him for daring to report on things or to them. Then he knows the suppression is high up, and he is delinquent in duty if he does not report it to the next highest org, and if no action there, right on up to the top. Anyone removing him for daring to report the factual results of his inspections can be severely handled by upper organizations. The ethics officer can only be in trouble if he fails to do his job and keep in ethics. Hitting people with conditions is such a small part of ethics that it is almost an abandonment of post. Letting people be hit with wrong conditions is a ComEv offense. Letting an SP collapse stats or an org is a shooting offense. An ethics officer uses ethics to protect ethics up stats and keep the stats up and to smoke out crimes that push people and stats down. It is a simple function. The basic duties of Department 3 are what it says: inspection and reports. These alone usually work. When they don't and stats fall or people fall off the org board, one goes into ethics actions. You don't let incompetent and suppressive people on staff in the first place, and you crowd ethics in on them if they're found to be there. You don't confuse an executive's effort to get the stats up with suppression. The ethics officer is making the environment safe so that production can occur and service can be given. He is making it unsafe for those who, by neglect or continual errors or suppression, push stats down and get good staff members to leave. If none of this is well understood and yet someone is making it impossible to work, find a 9-foot-high board fence. The ethics officer must know his ethics policy. He must understand why he is there. And the rest of the people in the org should understand it too. The ethics officer. His character. If a staff has no confidence in their ethics officer, EO, their morale is difficult to sustain. A staff member has his head down, doing his job. Suddenly, he finds out that nobody has mailed any letters or magazines for a month. This is a shock, an ARC break. He was doing his job, so he natters a bit and resolves to keep his eye open after this. He may even do some investigation on his own. In other words, he's distracted from his post and duties. The environment is not safe. Where was the EO? Who didn't notice there was nothing going out? A few weeks later, the staff member hears that the address plates are full of duplicates, wrong addresses, and half missing. This is a shock. It means the magazine never reached anyone, really, despite all the work. The staff member says, to hell with it. There couldn't be an ethics officer worth anything, and the org must be full of SPs. So the staff member goes out and has a cigarette and sneers. So do I. A safe environment is a productive environment. An unsafe environment is an empty hall. Ethics functions. Now, this would appear that the EO runs the org. or that he gets in everyone's way, or that he is a whip that forces people to work, or any other silly idea borrowed from a wog world where the police make things about as safe as a snake pit full of assorted reptiles. The tech fact is the data we have about SPs. There are very few of these in proportion to decent people. That one fact is something this society's police don't know. According to extant social tech, all people are basically bad and are only made good through punishment. So everyone everywhere has to be threatened. That's extant WOG tech. It doesn't work. The crime rate soars, so obviously the know-how isn't to be found out there. People are all animals, they say, and must be herded. Well, that's the modern social scientist's nutty idea. Society does not know that all they'd have to do is round up their few SPs and they'd have no crime. Instead, whenever they arrest criminals, they prove to these that society is brutal and crime justified, and just let them loose again. They don't straighten SPs up because the social scientists, the psychologist and psychiatrist, are at this writing at least mainly SPs themselves and haven't any tech but the club. So the EO must understand at once that he is dealing with a new, highly precise tech. It is the tech of ethics. A meter, a case folder, a course study record, a knowledge of the HCOBs on SPs and case types and PTS phenomena, and you can identify an SP promptly. He makes things go wrong, hurts people, oppresses. Around him, all the right actions vanish and the wrong actions appear. Now, because he or she can make others go PTS, then they make mistakes. So you get a whole group making things go wrong. The EO, knowing his ethics tech, can sort out the group, find the real SP, remove him, or depower him, and zingo, the group will rebound and do great. If an EO finds himself having to assign lots of conditions, finds as he inspects the org that the HCOPL on promotional actions of the org, or the old org rudiments list, when checked against the org, demonstrates too many outnesses, he knows that he is dealing with one or more SPs in the org or around its area. Careful investigation by the EO, and he has very exact procedures, all to be found in the org exec course ethics pack, discloses the source or sources of the trouble. He verifies all against the person's stats, study, and case record, and his meter, and then he acts. If he is right, the org straightens right out. If the EO is wrong in his investigation and action, things will get worse, i.e. stats will go down. So he can do it all over again, exhume the body he incorrectly shot, apologize, and now find the real SP. So ethics has its own tech, very superior tech indeed. Ethics could clean up a whole nation and make it boom, using its tech correctly. As ethics is a powerful tech, an uninformed EO who thinks he is a sort of local cop, KGB, FBI, Scotland Yard, sure has missed the point. They are, or are at this writing, total failures, as witness the condemnation of crime stats in their areas. They are simply oppressive terror symbols. They take psychiatric advice and get psychiatric results. The end product is mutiny and revolution by the population. When you threaten the whole population, you get riot and civil commotion. When you have riot and civil commotion, the police are threatening, because of lack of ethics tech, the whole population, whereas less than 10%, even as little as 1%, are bad hats. Suppressive reasonableness. The greatest enemy of the EO is the reasonable person. There are no good reasons for any outness except A. Natural catastrophes, such as earthquakes, lightning, etc. B. Suppressive persons. C. Persons who are PTS to suppressive persons. When an exec starts to explain the reasons for low stats instead of working to get high stats, he is being reasonable. When Joe Blow has just smashed his 5th typewriter and the DSM-Sec starts to explain how he's just a good boy gone a bit ARC breaky, she is being reasonable. He's either an SP or he's PTS to someone. The explanation is the answer to the EO's who, not the DSM-Sec's why. The ECs of 3 orgs are at violent war with each other. Somebody explains how reasonable this is. Their EOs had better meet quietly and find out who is an SP and who is PTS in that battle royal and act. Reasonableness is suppressive since it lets oppression continue without action being taken. Suppressive reasonableness is a common trait. It comes from the inability to confront evil. Evil takes a bit of confronting. People who want desperately to have no trouble often won't confront and handle trouble. Murder is murder. It occurs. A murder is not a frightened wish it had not occurred. It occurred. Somebody did it. There's the body. Psychiatrists, for instance, have two major types in their ranks, both psychopathic. One is a thiety-weety who thinks all criminals are poor abused things, and the other is himself a criminal psychopath who turns criminals loose on the society just to get even with people for his own fancied wrongs. Tracing several major crimes, it can be found that the violent criminal was in the hands of a psychiatrist earlier and told him his intentions, yet was let loose on society. Such a criminal, a rapist, a murderer, can't be helped by psychiatry. But that isn't the point. Decent people died, and some died horribly. That doesn't make a very safe environment, does it? It is true that we could straighten this criminal out if we could keep him out of circulation for a while. It is true the criminal is in trouble, but it is also true that he commits crimes. So an EO doesn't want somebody in circulation in a group or a society who commits crimes. The job of the EO is to disconnect and depower the criminal and so protect the group. The criminal, the SP, same thing, is trying to get even with people. That's his common denominator. He does it by covert omissions or overt violence. It all amounts to the same thing. The EO works for from 90% to 99% of the group, not for the 1%. When the EO has done his duty to the group, he can then take up the individual. I always handle things in that order. 1. Safeguard the group. 2. Rehab the individual. You will have a mess if you only do one or the other or try to rehab the individual criminal without safeguarding the group. In actual practice, you safeguard the group by removing or isolating the individual. Then you see what can be done for the individual to rehab him without endangering the group in any way. An EO can be used by an SP with false reports or stupid orders to needle and hurt a group. The duty of the EO is plain: follow policy. An EO can be paralyzed when seniors will not let him do his job, either because they don't understand it or because they are suppressive. The stats tell which one. But the EO has an action in this case. I recall that the first two EOs ever appointed did their job, tried to clean up the org where 2 criminals and a spy were in full bloom, and were clobbered by the OES, Organization Exec, and removed. The same executive carried the org over Niagara Falls within a year. He was having homosexual relations with the spy. The fault here was a lack of investigation or investigatory skill and ethics tech not yet developed fully. If these 2 EOs had found that they couldn't work and couldn't function despite crashing org stats, they should have located who was blocking any action by simple investigation, and they would have found the crime. And with that in hand, they could have said, "See here." EO conduct. An EO should never discuss staff members who are merely under investigation or act in a way to third-party people. An EO gets the facts and then acts. An EO should himself be an ethics upstat. EOs who aren't don't last long. An EO should act like a shepherd, not a wolf. When the facts are in plain view, he or she should act like a panther with one straight pounce. An EO who is an efficient EO is very popular with a staff. If he or she knows his business and carries it out effectively, the EO easily becomes a local hero. An EO shouldn't permit a staff to be nagged, threatened, or given floods of conditions. When he sees these things occurring, he knows it's time to investigate for who has got people PTS and handle without other orders. An EO's rehab actions should be limited to reinvestigation on request, correcting actions based on false reports, and seeing that Qual does any case handling that comes up. When an EO sees big efforts being spent on trying to get ex-wolves back into the fold, he investigates for the source of the effort, and having found it, finds out who and why. One EO never could get an org going, but sure worked to get ex-wolves painted white. One head of an org had a staff in virtual mutiny, but worked continuously to get reinstated to grace 3 people who over the years had done nothing on clear evidence but shoot up stats for outside pay. Yet the EO of that org didn't even try to find out why the head of that org was so constantly PTS as to worry only about rehabbing and reinstating SPs. And the EO of that org also sent no report or appeal to a higher org. An EO can get so irresponsible as to assign his whole function to just ethics conditions assignments. Never enforced, no sort out of staff ever attempted, no real confront at all, just a weary round of conditions and threats of conditions. That EO was removed, of course. Lots of threats and conditions mean only somebody is SP and a lot of others are PTS. An EO trying to handle a long org history of downstats and trouble should look first only at those who have been in the org throughout the trouble period. One or more will be SP or PTS, but good. An EO who has had an area all calm but suddenly sees it roughed up should look only at those who came into it since it went bad. An EO is only trying to make a safe environment in which staff members can work happily and good service is being given to the public. An EO in the final analysis is answerable to me that all is well and secure with his area. Jokers and degraders. It is an old principle that people who do not understand something occasionally make fun of it. A recent investigation, however, into the backgrounds and case condition of a small handful of people who were joking about their posts and those around them showed a somewhat more sinister scene. Each of these persons fell into one or more of the following categories. 1 were rock slammers, some list 1. 2 were institutional-type cases. 3 were NCG, meaning no case gain, the only cause of which is continuous present-time overts. 4 were severely PTS, potential trouble source, connected to rock slammers. It might be supposed that misunderstood word phenomena could also be part of this. The rebellious student in universities is usually handled by clearing up his misunderstoods or curing his hopelessness for his future. However, the investigation did not find that any of these jokers or degraders were acting that way solely because of misunderstood words, but the possibility cannot be ruled out. The 4 categories above were, however, fully verified. All the persons investigated were found to be the subject of declining statistics, both having them and causing them. Their areas were interbulated. At least one of the jokers was physically driving basic course students out of an org. In some cultural areas, wit and humor are looked upon as a healthy release. However, in the case of orgs, this was not found to be the case. Intentional destruction of the org or fellow staff members was the direct purpose. Therefore, all executives, HCO personnel, and case supervisors, as well as qual personnel and staff section officers, have a valuable indicator. Where they have a joker or degrader on their hands, they also have one or more of the above 4 conditions in that person. This opens the door to handling such people. Properly assigned and then fully done conditions are the correct ethics handlings. Correctly done expanded Dianetics, which includes confessionals, and fully done PTS handlings are the case remedies. Where ethics tech itself is not known or neglected, and where there are no HCOs, one can, of course, not expect the matter to be handled. And this would be too bad, because the case gain and life improvement available in proper ethics handlings, when fully followed through, can be quite miraculous. Where rock slammers have been undermining the tech and it is not fully known or used or is altered into unworkability, one cannot expect confessionals to be properly done or expanded Dianetics to be known and properly applied. The joker is advertising his symptoms. He is also advertising an area of the org where there is interbulation and down statistics, as well as staff members being victimized. Therefore, this is an administrative and technical indicator which cannot be overlooked and should be followed up. Spotted, investigated, and handled, this can be the beginning of an upward spiral for an organization. Where someone is driving ethics out, tech is not likely to go in. You have to get in ethics and tech before you can begin to get in admin. The next time you, as an executive, wonder why you are working so hard, look for the joker in the deck. Humor is one thing. Destroyed orgs and human beings are quite something else. It is our business to get the show on the road and get the job done. OT levels. Psychotics deal with doing people in. Their whole mission in life is destruction. They inveigh against lower-level gains and seek to discredit them, since these run contrary to their aberrated purpose. But when it gets to clears and OT levels, psychos go berserk. They are, it happens, terrified of punishment for their own crimes. The thought of someone being sensible or powerful enough to punish them the way they would do is more than they can stand. You can, with the utmost certainty, identify a criminal psychotic by the way he vilifies or degrades or seeks to stop clears and OTs from coming into existence. It is lost on him that immorality and crime in others stem from the very things he is doing to them. So look well at psychs and anti-religious campaigners. They are speaking from their own blackened souls, and they speak from terror. That people, when they grow saner, are less inclined to vengeance is an argument they cannot assimilate. They know if they had the power to torture and kill everyone, they would do so. Thus the psychs with their rantings and electric shocks wear their own brand clearly marked on them by their own conduct in life. Recognize them for what they are, psychotic criminals, and handle them accordingly. Don't let them stop man from going free.